September 18th. Let me remind everyone who may address the board tonight that when you do, please sign in on the clipboard on this table in front of me. Make sure the microphone's turned on and that you speak clearly into it. It's especially important that you sign in clearly on the clipboard tonight because our record keeper, Zina, is not here, and she's going to be working from the audio recording or the recordings that we have in that clipboard to tell who's spoken. So please be sure you do that. And also, as we make motions, we're going to be particularly careful with making sure everybody's names are clear for Zina to make sure she's got the record. Our next meeting after tonight is October 2nd, 2018 at 7 o'clock in this room, Matthew Thornton room. Let me appoint Nelson to a voting position in for Lynn. And with that, we're ready for the first bit of business on our agenda, which is the Planning and Zoning Administrator's Report. Kelly, do you have anything for us?
No.
Is there any comments or questions by members of the board for staff? Seeing none, that completes that bit of business. Next item on our agenda is Synergy Self-Storage LLC as the applicant and owner, and its continued review for acceptance and consideration of a site plan review for modifications to the previously approved site plan regarding access and parking. The parcel is located at 403 Daniel Webster Highway in the I-1 Industrial, Aquifer Conservation, and Elderly Housing Overlay Districts. A portion of the parcel is subject to the Flood Hazard Conservation District, Tax Map 4D 3, Lot 84-1. The item was continued from our August 7th Planning Board meeting, and we also have a request from the applicant for a further continuance to November 6th, 2018, in order to facilitate peer review of the engineering designs that they've done. Kelly, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
Nope, that covers it.
Excellent. And so I don't know if the applicant is here at all, but what's the will of the board with respect to the request for the continuance?
Mr. Chairman, this matter has been dragging on now for 8 months, during which time the applicant has been parking vehicles and renting the space, which he has not been allowed to do. I feel we're being taken for a ride by this applicant. I've felt so for some time and have said so. My view, if we give him his date, which I gather is supposed to be the first meeting in November, I think we make it absolutely clear, and I'll certainly make a motion to that date, but clear that if it isn't provided complete, finished, and in an approvable state on that date, we should take action to penalize the applicant for what's going on.
Okay. I certainly appreciate your comments. Our course of action, should we arrive at November 2nd, or if we decide not to make a continuance tonight, is simply to not advance his application towards approval or to deny it. That leaves him in a place where the department has choices to make about enforcement or non-enforcement. But the applicant can always turn right around and submit another application the next day, and we're on again. That being said, I think the importance of getting the peer review of the engineering done and not have the applicant before us with engineering designs that we've not had the benefit of peer review for makes it worth the wait.
Yeah, but he hasn't actually produced any plans yet, Mr. Chairman. He's still fiddling around doing it, or his engineer is fiddling around doing it. This is what, by now, after 8 months, he should have been able to submit plans for our peer consultants to review. But
what's the status of that, Kelly? Because I thought that he was going to have those plans in our hand. Not that it's in time for peer review, but that the plans would be submitted by today.
We were told we'd get plans this week. To my knowledge, we haven't received anything. I know Tim's been in contact via email with the engineer. That's where we're at. We're supposed to get them by the end of this week, supposedly. So.
Okay. I was in previous consultation with Tim, I was under the impression we were to have those at the end of last week.
yeah,
Apparently, they needed to do additional testing as a result of some of the drainage changes that are occurring. So their engineer was putting together those changes and putting a plan together for us to review.
I'm coming around to your position, sir.
Any
other comments and questions?
What if we don't grant the extension or the continuance? What's the next step? Is it a full denial, or is it a? we
if we
make that
don't
motion
grant the
now?
continuance, we would have a hearing based on what's been submitted so far, which is nothing.
Right.
And then you would have to vote whether you would approve that or not.
So could he continue the next hearing, I guess is what I'm saying?
We always have the opportunity to vote on granting an approval or for a continuance or not granting one, including here tonight.
Okay.
If we do not continue this tonight and therefore would take it up on the agenda and have no presentation and vote it down, let's say,
Gotcha.
then you would have the applicant, in this particular case, the reason that he's before us is that he's done some construction without any prior approval. And as the department has challenged that, he can either face an enforcement action or come here to get approval for what's been built. That's why he's before us. So if we made a final decision tonight that was not a continuance and that was not an approval, he would no longer have an application in process, and the department would move forward with an enforcement action for having built a commercial development without any approvals. And if that's the result that you think is the right result, that's the way you would vote.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of sharing Alistair's opinion. I mean, it's been a while and nothing. 8 months is a long time. I mean, you can get a lot done in 8 months if you really wanted to. So.
Well, it's not only that it's 8 months, it's 8 months during which time he has been using the facility which he created. He is taking in money from people who are parking their stuff on his site. And, you know, I think well, never mind. My view is think we should grant this last continuance, but with it, and I'm asking that the staff send him a note saying that it was continued, but he has to produce this on the meeting or whatever it is,
November.
November the 6th, 2018, and if he hasn't got it, then we will recommend action. That will be my motion, Mr. Chairman.
So that's a motion to grant the continuance with a notice to the applicant that there won't be any further continuances after November 6th. It'll be a final decision one way or another on that night. Is that your motion?
That is my notion, sir.
Is there a second for that motion? There's no second for that motion, and so the motion would fail for lack of a second. Does the board have any other disposition it'd like to take tonight?
I completely concur with Alistair's sentiments on this. I think it should be made clear to him that we're going to deny this, completely deny it, if it is not approvable that night. All the conditions met, all the peer review done, and everything clear so that it's finished. You know, I don't want him coming in here with a half-baked plan in November telling us that, oh, I didn't get to do this, or I just found out today from the peer review that, because I submitted 2 days ago, and that it's not complete. I don't want to see that kind of plan from him. I want to make it very clear that it's going to be denial, unless it's 100% approvable at the meeting that we hold, and that the plan is complete. I don't want a plan that say, well, we're going to fix this, we're going to fix that.
I would say, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Disco has expressed more eloquently than I exactly my feelings.
No one's more eloquent than you, Alistair.
Well, okay, so let's, I don't disagree with anything that you've said, but you seem to be of the same sentiment as Alistair. So are you seconding his motion to grant the continuance to November 6th on that basis, or do we still have no second for that motion and we're looking for some other motion?
Well, I'll second it on that basis, just
Okay.
to move things along.
Other comments or questions on that?
I agree with the whole thing too, is because they're using those spaces right now without it being approved. And in my travels down in that area, they've had some vehicles that are leaking fluids onto the ground without any kind of protection to the water low-lying areas or the drainage system or anything like that. And it's just kind of, I don't think it should be used unless it's approved, an approved space.
With the appropriate conditions
With the
to avoid
appropriate
some leaks
conditions,
and
yeah.
drips.
I mean, they shouldn't even be using it right now unless it's approved. But
Dan, thoughts, comments? Or- you're not forced to. I'm not
No,
twisting your arm.
I think we've given them ample opportunity. I mean, in my opinion, I'm most likely not going to vote in favor of it. I think it should be done, and his application should be denied. with no continuance.
Tom, do you have any thoughts you want to share? No. There's a motion properly seconded to grant the continuance as a final continuance, and the application will meet its final disposition on November 6th. I'm still making up my mind on what I would do to vote on that motion, because I know, separate from the things that have been discussed in the 8 months that it's taken here, that there have been, in preparation for this agenda, promises made in the last week to have things done as we sit here today that are not done. And I'm more troubled by that than the 8-month history, because that's a promise that was made last week in terms of having some plans in the hopper. That's really troubling.
I mean, it is Tuesday, so he said end of this week, so that's the
So-
info I have.
The communications I was talking about was that they would be in from last week, and that they would not necessarily be ready for or peer review completed, but they would be submitted as we arrived here tonight for our meeting, and not
Complete
couple
with
of more days.
And complete, Mr. Chairman, with the necessary funds to pay the outside
That
consultant.
was the communication. And so there's my thought and my comment. So the motion is, there's 6 of us here, to grant a continuance until November 6th, with notification to the applicant that there would be no further continuances. The application would meet its final disposition that night. All in favor of granting that continuance, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Any abstaining? Nelson, did you vote?
No, I didn't vote.
You gonna abstain?
Yeah.
Okay, abstaining. So I vote no. So that's 3-2-1 to grant the continuance, and the motion carries. So there it is, to let the applicant know that November 6th is it, and it's not it in terms of appearing here and continue talking. There will be a final vote that night.
Okay.
Thank
Just
you.
so I'm clear, because I have to write up the results right after this. That's Alistair's motion and Nelson's second.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying
Yep.
that for the record as well. Patriots, next item on our agenda is Patriots Car Wash as the applicant and owner continued review for acceptance and consideration of a waiver of full site plan review to permit an automobile service repair station addition. The parcel is located at 376 Daniel Webster Highway in the C2 Commercial and Aquifer Conservation Districts, tax map 4D3, Lot 2. And the item is continued from July 17th and August 21st meetings. Kelly, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
So the applicant did submit a new plan on August 27th, which appears to address a lot of what the board's been discussing throughout this process. However, staff did notice this iteration of the plan has a scale of 1 inch to 20 feet, which, if it is accurate, would mean that the existing car wash building is located only 10 feet from the property line. And that would mean that relief is needed from the zoning board, as it was, the requirement was 20 feet when it was constructed. So the applicant either needs to provide a plan with that accurate scale or seek the necessary relief from the ZBA. If the board feels comfortable, you could leave it up to community development staff to determine if the scale is accurate, or if you'd like them to go to ZBA. It's kind of your call how you want to proceed with that.
So just so I understand it, the plan that we have before us is a little unclear about how close he is to that sideline. If he's within 20 feet, he needs relief from the zoning board. If he's more than 20 feet, we just need a plan that makes that clear.
Correct.
But-
And staff can sort that out after the fact, depending on what your decision is tonight.
Okay, thank
So.
you. So, thank you for coming back again, and I want to compliment you. Aside from this issue with the scale and all of that, you were really listening last time. You got everything I could think of as I looked at this plan, all of the things that we wanted shown on here. I think you checked every box, so thank you for that. Please introduce yourself for the record. Make sure you sign in on the clipboard and tell us where we're at.
Can I borrow a pen?
Of course. Do you understand what the staff was talking about with the scale and that issue?
I'm not exactly sure what side of the property they're talking about.
Where the blue arrow is exiting your car wash? Yeah, that corner of the building. Hold your microphone up closer to when you're talking, make sure it's turned on. But that corner of the building is the one where we're not really sure that that's far enough from the property line. It probably is, it's just a matter of drawing it correctly, but we just got to get that clarified.
Sure. My name is Ronnie Ganem. I'm the Patriots Car Wash, 376 Daniel Webster Highway. So the scale that was used on this is actually referencing this actual plan. This plan is to scale, not that
Okay.
plan. And that's why I have a reference on that plan to this exact plan for scale. If you measure from here to the end of the property, it's actually around 32 feet, so it's more than 20 feet from the property line.
Okay, so
And
we can.
You do have a copy of this
Yep.
in the file as well.
Okay, so that helps. It'll leave you with something, if the board approves and goes along with the rest of the proposal, it'll leave you with a little detail to clarify with the department, but you wouldn't necessarily have to come before us or any other board if it is actually 32 feet from there. We just got to kind of get that shown on a plan correctly. If it isn't 32 feet, then obviously that changes things, but assuming that you got it correct, good, that helps.
But
This
Mr. Chairman,
plan
since-
is 1 inch 20 feet, so based on, again, the measurement from here, it seems like it is more than sufficient. And this is the existing structure. Anyway.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say, Mr. Chairman. It's been there a long time, so if it's not right, it's never been right, in which case he should be granted, I believe, what's called what's the correct expression?
Grandfathered.
Well, no, it's not. It's automatic relief.
There's some equitable relief from the
Equitable
zoning
relief.
board,
There we
the
go.
zoning
Thank
board
you.
that they can give him, that he doesn't need a variance, but he gets some relief that allows him to move on with it because of exactly that. It's been there forever and the world hasn't stopped rotating yet. So, tell me more about what you've done with your plan and where we're at with things and see if we can.
I just modified the plan based on the board's recommendation, last meeting recommendation. I added the lights, basically the existing lights that you folks asked for. The existing lights are marked in red, but those lights are already on the subject property. The proposed lights are displayed in yellow on the plan, and they'll be mounted on or around the new structure at 11 foot, around 10 to 11 feet high. I put on the plan the owner of record as 376 Daniel Webster Highway LLC. We mentioned that the subject is serviced by town water and sewer. The proposed structure is 74 feet from Daniel Webster Highway, 53 feet from Zell Management Property, and 74 feet from Sky Mall. Plan reference site is Plan 4D-3-2, number 639. This is the plan I mentioned, is the plan attached that you folks have a copy of.
Excellent.
Do you have a copy at planning board or at the community development, or we didn't get a copy of that other plan that you're referring to?
I submitted the copy of
Tom,
the
That
plan
was
with my
in previous-
application.
That was in previous submittals.
Was it really?
Yeah,
Yep.
the original submittal included that plan.
This was the only plan in this.
That plan doesn't have what you've drawn?
No,
Plan
that's
doesn't have what
that's
you've
the
drawn on it.
original plan for the site, the original site plan.
Okay, because this scale doesn't look like it's correct either. I was just curious as to what we're all referencing.
Yeah, no, we're referencing the original site plan that was done before, and again, the plan number is the 4D-3-2.
Yeah. So that this full-size plan that he has on the table was submitted to us in an earlier, and it's also the one that he's been trying to show what he's building on in different photocopies that he's given us over the different times that we've met with him. But unmodified, it's recorded with the registry as number 639, or in our files as 639. So we do have it, and he's correct that on the full-size piece of paper, the scale would be done by the engineers and is probably accurate. What he's tried to produce for us on his own, which he's allowed to do, is where that kind of disconnect comes from. We just need to get that fixed up for that scale.
I measured, or I noted the exact measurements on the addition, I didn't know that I need to do the exact, on
Yeah. No, it's complicated to
dimensions
get that
on the
right.
existing property, so I did just the addition.
That makes sense.
We measured the parking spots based on the recommendations, and we found that we can actually easily add 15 new parking spots on the side, and they're 9 by 18, which is at the 90-degree angle, which basically is what the
Regulation.
community, regulations requires. Based on that information, we have now more than enough parking spots for the usage on the property.
Okay. Thank you for that.
We also noted on the plan the computation maximum number of employees, et cetera. It's also noted there. I went back to the original plans and we measured the light poles, and the light poles are 18 feet high. That's the question Robert asked last time.
Yeah.
Those are the existing light poles in red.
Okay. Excellent.
Sprinkler system will be installed on the property based on recommendations or requirements, if I want to say, by the fire department. The fire department did say that they will not require sprinkler system to be installed on the existing car wash bay, just because there's water everywhere. So
You wouldn't need sprinklers in a car wash, no.
And the last thing is the floor drainage, per our discussion, will be only added to the car wash, self-service car wash, and won't be any floor drainage inside the garages.
Excellent. Thank you. Comments or questions by members of the board?
Can I ask you, sir, have you read the letter that Kelly Chamel sent you on, dated September the 14th, 2018?
Yes, sir.
So you've read that?
Yep.
Well, great.
Perfect. Other comments or questions? Awesome.
Yeah, a couple questions. You skipped over the part about painting. What's this present plan for the paint booth on this site, if there is one, which isn't identified?
I did reach out to the Department of Environmental Services with the state of New Hampshire just to see exactly what the requirements are for paint booth and painting on the subject property. They did send me 60 pages of requirements that basically I honestly read through as much as and tried to understand as much as I can. Based on my discussion with the lady from the Department of Environmental Services, there is actually no requirements for filtration system if you use less than 500 gallons per year in paint. Basically, if you're using less than 500 gallons a year, you can paint on site. You have to the exhaust fans have to be at least 4 feet above the highest ceiling level that you have. So you have to basically install exhaust system, but it does not require filtration system. So realistically, we can, based on her recommendation, if you're not going to use 500 gallons of paint, you can actually paint on the subject property as long as the exhaust fans are installed in the ceiling and up 3 feet from the highest roof. And that's the requirements of Department of Environmental Services. They will come and inspect the property. They will check to make sure that obviously the exhaust fans and everything else meets the department regulations and the state of New Hampshire regulations prior to us doing anything if we wanted to do that. When I did some math, realistically 500 gallons of paint will paint around 18,000 cars.
I'm not quite sure we paint that many, but
No,
it may paint you quite a
it's
few.
half a pint will paint a car. Half a pint of paint will
Hasn't
paint.
been my experience, but okay.
Well, that's based on what
Surely
I showed.
depends on how much damage has been done to the car.
Well, if obviously if you take the whole car apart and stuff, but on average, I'm talking if there's an accident, if there's damage on a vehicle, and I did the math, and
Yeah,
there's
you're
half a pint will
little touches up and patches. You're right. I got you.
for if it's a fender and a bumper and a hood,
Either-
less than half a pint will paint. But again, my whole
Whatever the
point-
number per
my
car
whole-
is, I'm comfortable that you're not going to get to 500 gallons.
My
I get
my
you.
whole point of that, it's very, very, very unlikely for me to reach the 500 gallons. And the other thing is, If I have to work with insurance companies, I have to install a paint booth. So it's going to go back to the same thing again. So we'll be, as soon as, financially it's feasible to add a paint booth, we'll be adding a paint booth. But in the meantime, we'll be, obviously, before doing anything, we will abide by all Department of Environmental Services regulations. We'll make sure that everything is done in accordance to what's posted.
Excellent. I saw you have a note on here that says the exact same thing.
Correct.
So,
Where's that note?
in the list of notes, it's about the third one from the bottom. Auto paint will require the subject to meet all.
Yeah. Okay,
That
got
one.
it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to add right now, or other? Okay.
So are you requesting, when we decide on this for approval, to put the paint booth in there now? Or are you saying that you don't want it in there yet and you'll come back to us when you want to add it?
Neither one of those. He's not putting it in now, but we're giving him approval to put it in the future as long as he complies with DES
Gotcha.
requirements.
2 questions about the paint booth.
Yes,
Do you have to register with New Hampshire DES that you are a auto paint
Yes.
painter?
Yes.
Okay, and do you have to report your gallons of paint used to them, or how do you, what's your checks and balances, I guess?
They have an inspector. They'll stop by. I mean, I don't think it's more regulated more than that for the time being. They'll send an inspector. An inspector can come in at any point in time to check on your usage on. But honestly, I don't know how. I have not asked that question on
Okay.
how they track how many gallons of paint you use and so on and so forth. I think they measure it based on the size of the shop and number of employees
think-
and things like this, and maybe where you order your paint from.
I think they'll actually check on your records of purchases. You'll have to keep copies of any purchases of paint, and they would vet that, because I know that's what
Yeah.
has been done to somebody else. I know about it.
Okay. Yeah, honestly, I did not
I just-
ask that question on how
Just-
they. Obviously, we're going to keep receipts for tax reasons and everything else. So if that's the way they, we're going to comply with all the requirements. So I did not go in detail to exactly, what we need to do in terms of record keeping and so on and so forth. But whatever, before we touch anything, we're going to talk to the state, make sure that we comply with all the record keeping requirements, and whatever it needs to be done at the time, we'll make sure that it's done. So.
That's all, perfect, thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah,
Nelson?
a couple more. I think you should show on the plan where you're going to put the paint booth. Is that a problem? If you're going to put it in one of these new bays, where is the paint booth going to go?
The paint booth will go in one of the new bays that will be added to the subject. And the only requirement again for a paint booth is the fire sprinkler system per se, and the fire sprinkler system will be spread throughout the property or throughout the addition. So it's really hard to exactly say where I'm going to put the paint booth right now, and I don't think it's going to have much of an effect on anything in the subject. If I put it on bay number 1 or bay number 2, I don't think it's going to affect anything in the subject in terms of environmental or anything else for
Well,
that
what
matter.
about the vent, the overhead vent you talked
Well,
about?
the vent will only be installed after the paint booth is installed. I can't install a vent prior to the paint booth. So when if you order a paint booth kit, it's going to come with its venting, and they're going to come and install it and put everything in place with the filtration system and so on and so forth.
So you don't want to show us where it's going to be? in
More than
these-
happy to. I don't.
doesn't
I said
know.
I don't think it.
No. I think also, in terms of how we generally review buildings, we don't look at internal floor plans or where the location of the mechanicals will be on the ceiling and that sort of thing. So-
But this is an especially environmentally sensitive piece of equipment, and I just,
Apparently
Would
DES
like to
doesn't
see-
think so, because you don't even have to filter it if it's under 500 gallons.
yeah.
I just have a simple question.
Yes, sir.
Assuming there's bathrooms on the premises,
There's already an existing bathroom that'll be used.
just out of curiosity, where are they?
It's actually. It's right here.
In the office?
That's next to the office.
Now,
There's
is
an
that
existing.
is that for the people in the waiting area as well, or just staff?
Everybody will have access to the bathroom from both sides. So there'll be 2 doors, one on each side to be accessed.
And
Nelson?
One further question on the floor drain. You're going to add the floor drain in the self area is this piece that says, that's next to the back island, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and the other drain is over under the existing car wash, existing,
The existing
tying
car
in.
wash has multiple drains.
okay, and you're tying into that system. Where does that system exhaust or vent out, or what happens? Or is it recycled?
So there is, there's like a drainage, almost like a tunnel drainage,
Yeah. Uh-huh,
throughout the existing car wash that actually goes into an oil water separator.
mhm.
And the water gets cleaned or whatever, and then it goes to the sewer system.
Okay, the water isn't recycled.
We have a recycling system in place.
Do you do?
I do
you-
not recycle right
You
now.
don't, okay, yeah. And, but this new one will tie in somewhere to that?
It will tie to the same system inside the existing car wash and will drain into the oil water separator. And I can recycle, honestly, I just financially just didn't, I don't use enough water to make it financially feasible. So it's, right now, it's cheaper for me to take down water versus recycling. That's why I don't recycle.
Yeah. Where is that separator located on the property?
It's this side.
Uh,
And this gets
Can't see
inspected on a yearly basis by the town of Merrimack. So
Could you show again? I couldn't see what you
I'm
were
sorry.
pointing at.
it's in this area.
Okay, thank you.
Again, you need a permit to operate a oil water separator, so there's actually every year we have it inspected. It gets pumped out at least once a year, cleaned out once a year by a septic service company.
Thank you for that. Neil, looked like you had a question.
Yeah, I just noticed that you indicate there's 25 parking spots, but when I look at the print, I can only come up with 22. Can you show me where the other 3 spots may be?
It's 22.
Like 15 plus, yeah.
You are correct, actually. It's
Okay,
it's
I just
22. I'm sorry.
making sure we'll make a correction on the notes for that, I suppose.
Yep.
Staff has it noted in the memo.
The staff memo says 22.
Okay, thank
So
you.
have them changed on the plan, because it does say 25.
Correct.
These-
It's just
Under
a
the
memo.
conditions,
Mistake.
it notes to change that.
F4 or something like that.
Okay, other comments and questions? I don't recall whether we've had a
We
public
haven't
hearing on
accepted
this.
it yet, Mr. Chairman.
Haven't even accepted it yet? All right, what's the
No.
will of the board on acceptance?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we accept this application for review.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Neil. Any other discussion on acceptance? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? All right, so we've accepted it for review. There's obviously a request to waive full site plan review.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we grant the waiver of full site plan review on the basis that strict conformity would pose an unnecessary hardship to the applicant, and the waiver is not contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulations.
Is there a second for that motion? Dan seconds the motion to waive full site plan review. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay, are there other waivers that the applicants asked for other than full site plan review, or once you do full site plan review, you pretty much wiped them all out anyway? Is there any member of the public or a butter or interested citizen who wishes to weigh in and offer the board any information on this application? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Further discussion by members of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion.
Tom's got it.
Sorry, Tom.
I have a somewhat trivial question for Kelly, actually. In 13A I, you asked them to add, on the 4th bullet, to add the word lot before the word subject. And it just reads kind of funny to me, the lot subject is serviced. Is that what your intent is, or is it the subject lot is serviced?
Subject lot.
All right, so
add
after.
lot after subject instead of before.
That's good.
Yes.
Yeah, like I said,
That's careful
somewhat
reading.
trivial, but it's in
careful
the things
reading,
we're
so.
going to approve, so.
All right. Careful reading. Also, you were in the midst of.
No, I was winding up.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we grant Final acceptance to this application, subject to the conditions of Kelly Shamill's memo dated September the 14th, 2018. Every single one of the conditions there will need to be approved, but otherwise I think we should say go ahead.
Thank you for that motion, Alistair. Is there a second? Neil will second it. I assume that one of the conditions that's already in the memo deals with this question about the scale and the relief from the ZBA if necessary.
Well, I think that's a fair comment, Mr. Chairman. I think we should say that we leave that to the community development staff to resolve that issue. And it's their decision if it doesn't meet the requirements of the plan. In other words, the distance isn't great enough. They could do the necessary thing to get an equitable relief proposal through the ZBA.
Is that satisfactory articulation, Kelly?
Yes, thank you.
Is that consistent with your second? Okay. Any further discussion on the final disposition of the application? All in favor of granting conditional final approval subject to the conditions in the memo as edited here tonight, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? So that is 600 for your final approval.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the time you spent.
Thank you.
Yes, we certainly made you work for it, but you got a good plan when we're finally done with it.
Who seconded
Neil seconded. Item 5 on the agenda is Crosswoods Path 3 LLC as the applicant and DW Development LLC as the owner. And this is conceptual discussion of a potential site plan for a redesign of previously approved but not constructed professional office units into a mixed-use 21-unit multifamily residential building with attached office space. The parcel is located at 747 Daniel Webster Highway in the C2 Commercial and I1 Industrial, R Residential, and Aquifer Conservation Districts, Tax Map 7E, Lot 46-54. Kelly, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
Nope.
All right, so right before we turn it over to the applicant to make a presentation, I just want to remind all of those in attendance here that we are addressing this as a conceptual site plan, which is the applicant's opportunity to give us a proposal to have a general discussion and also to hear feedback from you. It's not eligible for a final vote here tonight, and the applicant hasn't done any of the steps that could get him to a final vote here tonight. This is just a discussion about a concept. And with that, please sign in, introduce yourself, and tell us about the project.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Brad Westgate. I'm a lawyer with Weiner & Bennett in Nashua, 111 Concord Street, representing the applicant, which is Crosswoods Path 3 LLC, whose principal, Christopher Bova, is sitting with me at the table. Also in attendance, I believe, is David Whitemore of DW Development LLC, which is the property owner. And I represent Mr. Bova's company, which is the applicant. There was a concept plan submitted, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure if everyone has copies, but we made some extra copies, maybe hand out just so you all have it. They're relatively simple. Yes, you have the 11 by 17 versions, I suspect.
These guys?
That and the
yeah.
existing conditions.
Right, you do. If I could, Mr. Chairman, maybe give just a little bit of background about the property and then some ideas of why we're here and what we need to do to process this proposal. So the property is known as Map 7E, Lot 46-54. It's got about 2.5 acres, just over, on the east side of Daniel Webster Highway. It's got 250-plus feet of frontage on Daniel Webster Highway. It's a vacant parcel, and it's situated within 3 zones, R, C2, and I1. They all kind of cross through this property. And as you saw in the staff report from Robert Price, the property is part of the Crosswoods Path PUD. There have been a couple of approvals for this property that were granted way back in 1998, and more recently in 2013, there was an approval for a 3 single-story duplex-style commercial office building. Nothing's been built there. This is, again, a vacant parcel. As the board's well aware, PUDs have non-residential use requirements as a kind of mix, if you will, in the PUD. What Mr. Bova would like to do is, in a sense, replicate the building that is a 21-unit apartment building that was the former office building on the same side of DW Highway, just south of this property. So where this property is just on the north corner of Crosswoods Path Boulevard and DW Highway, the 21-unit building that is there now, the former office, is just on the south side. Crosswoods Path 3 LLC owns that building. About 3 years ago, I came before the board, came before the zoning board, pardon me, seeking a variance from the density requirements in the PUD regulation to convert that office building into the 21 apartment units. That variance was granted, and I believe there was either administrative approval or site plan review waiver process with the planning board because there was minimal site changes to the project, converting it from office space to the 21 units.
Yeah, we had a hearing on it, I remember that.
Yes, we did.
Exactly. I think I was put out to pasture at that point in the process. I guess I did what I was supposed to do, and then that was that. So what Mr. Bova would like to do here is build 21 units of residential space and 1,500 square feet of commercial office space, probably divided into 3 units, as you can see on this conceptual plan. This conceptual plan also shows some outside storage units in the northwest corner. Upon reflection, Mr. Bova will dispense with that. It's unnecessary. It doesn't add to the property. Frankly, it generates the need for another variance. So the idea would be to simply go with the proposed building that you see and the 1,500 square feet of office space. The office space probably would not be located where you see as well, but perhaps flipped to be facing into the northeast rather than into the southwest. I think that's probably a better orientation for that use, at least what Mr. Bova has kind of analyzed. So the idea would be 21 units of residential and 1,500 square feet of office space. The residential mix would be two-bedroom units and 1 is proposed. He would like to build 12 two-bedroom units and 9 one-bedroom units. That's the same mix that's in the existing building on the other side of Crosswoods Path Boulevard. The square footages of the units would be similar, very, very similar arrangement that's presently existing. So we wanted to get some feedback from the planning board on both this proposal in a general sense, any sense or observations you may have relative to the density variance, which I'll talk about just for a few more moments, and then site plan, inside peculiarities, specific ideas, that sort of thing. Basically following the recommendation that Robert Price put in his memo to you as to the purpose of tonight's meeting. So just a little more detail on the proposal. There would probably be some small self-storage or mini-storage areas for the tenants in the ground level of the building. The building at 1 Crosswoods Path Boulevard has that sort of arrangement presently. The density variance specifically pertains to Table 15.6 of the zoning ordinance, and that table sets forth the number of units in multifamily buildings based on bedroom size that are allowed in a PUD. And what it says is that you can have up to 6 units per acre of 2-bedroom units in a PUD setting, 7 units of one-bedroom units per acre in a PUD setting. So we have 2.5 acres. The proposal would be 12 two-bedroom units, so that would require 2 acres off the bat, 6 per every acre, and 9 single bedroom units. So that would be about 1 1/3 acre approximately for those 9, 7 per acre, and then 2 more, so 2 9ths, if you will, of another acre. So I rounded up to 0.3, pardon me. So we would need theoretically 3.3 acres to do this mix. There's only 2.5. Our thought is that it's not out of whack, if you will, with what was approved in the prior variance 3 years ago across the road, and that being that the existing property at 1 Crosswoods Path Boulevard is about 1.9, almost 2 acres for the 21 units with the same mix. So there's actually a smaller lot over there that has those 21 units, and this would be for the 2.5 acre site. Property has town water and sewer, of course. The PUD approval the PUD regulation allows up to 400 dwelling units in a PUD. Presently, I believe there's 131 dwelling units in Crosswoods Path, so we're not bumping up against that sort of regulatory maximum, if you will. Just lastly, and again, I'm more interested in your thoughts in continuing to talk, frankly, and certainly thoughts of the neighbors and abutters and public. You may remember from 3 years ago that part of the reason we sought the variance for the office building was that the idea of kind of standalone commercial or office space in that setting, in that part of town, in that area, and in the context of that PUD just wasn't all that viable. It didn't pan out that way in terms of the leasing out of the office building. And it just seems that the residential use along these lines is more compatible with that property. It provides a relatively affordable sort of living quarters, if you will, in that end of town. That the other building is leased out very well, and look at Chris for a nod, but I think it's continuously leased out well from its outset. So it seems sort of a sensible duplication, if you will, of what was successful before, and a pretty good use of that particular parcel. So we're certainly anxious to see your thoughts on the idea of the density variance, if you would be inclined to make any communication to the zoning board or not, and any particularities relative to site plan. And happy to answer questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Attorney Westgate. So my question is really kind of understanding more about what you envision these office spaces to be used for, and help me understand their future success, where some of the offices that we've talked about in the past, although in a different building, really didn't seem to work that well.
I'm going to let Mr. Bova discuss that, if I may.
Oh, absolutely, of course.
One of the offices, is that on? One of the offices we're gonna use as a rental office,
Okay,
and the other two I'm gonna have to rent out.
okay. Do you have has anybody expressed interest to you that they are looking for it, or what kind of businesses do you think are the target?
None yet.
Okay. I think that when you come to presenting a final plan for those, there'll have to be some sort of notes in terms of understanding a little bit about the kinds of tenants, professional offices of, I don't want to say a doctor's office or a lawyer's office or something like that. It's a bit different than somebody that might use it to support a painting business or something where they've got materials coming and going and are part of the supply. Somebody that's obviously got a retail business is a whole different cat than some kind of professional office building. And I don't mean to sort of dictate what your choices are, but we'll want to know more about all of that. My initial concern is wondering whether those will be viable as offices. And if not, then does it make sense to consider a proposal that just has the residential in it? And I know that we've got these regulations about the PUD, which talks about mixing commercial and residential. My understanding of the motivation behind that is to make sure that a complicated development like this ends up being tax positive for the town. But I also know that some of the recent residential developments that we've had are tax positive without commercial developments. And that's kind of more of a philosophical decision for the board to make as it considers what to do with PUDs in general, or PUDs that have been in the past that may need some different relief, about whether we cling to this requirement about the combination of commercial and residential.
If I may, just to run with that thought, Mr. Chairman, I believe, and Kelly will correct me, I think this lot with the existing approvals is the only commercial component of the Crosswoods Path PUD approval now, because the office building's conversion to the residential uses. So if we don't have a commercial component to this application, and that this got approved solely residential, there would be no more commercial element to the PUD approval, I don't think, for Crosswoods Path.
No, understood, and the planning board would have to be comfortable making a decision to allow that, and I don't know
Right.
whether we are or not, I'm not sure whether I am or not. I think frankly, you know, an apartment building with some kind of a business down below that is hard to rent or isn't that full, and it's got your rental office, if that doesn't seem like a viable result, then really all we're approving is residential anyway, because there'll be, you know, 1,500 square feet of empty space down the first floor, but that's, you know, not particularly efficient, and it won't be commercial.
Well-
Yeah, 1,000, because you're gonna,
500 of it's gonna be taken.
Yeah.
By
I don't-
right, by right, I think the book says you can use it for that.
yeah, does that count as your commercial if you do it
Yes.
for your own rental office? I guess it's up to us to decide
Actually, it
that.
says it right in the book, on the same page as the.
It may very well. And so when I first opened up my package and I saw what you're proposing, I thought, you know, I like this better with commercial development on this site, and it fit with the PUD regulations. And as I thought about it more, I'm sort of wondering why we are sticking to those kinds of concerns. I would guess that when we hear from the public, and we've got quite a few people here that are interested in this application, that their interests are going to be in traffic and noise and the kinds of things that the site like this would develop. And frankly, you know, 21, 22 residential units are going to be a lot less noise or traffic than the restaurant that was approved here last time around, or the daycare and commercial development that was approved in one of the previous ones. And so, although some folks may look at it and say 21 new apartments is going to add traffic, it's actually far, far less impactful than some of the other choices that are more in line with this old way of thinking about PUDs. So.
And I guess we would have to communicate with staff as to whether a variance would be needed to undo, if you will, the PUD commercial component, or whether that could be at planning board level. I just don't have the answer to that and haven't thought that through, Mr. Chairman.
Hadn't thought it through either before. With respect to your presentation about the density variance, I appreciate you explaining it to us and at least proposing that the board at least think about giving some kind of indication to the zoning board about whether we look favorably or don't. I'd say obviously variances are issued by them, and they've got to apply their 5 statutory criteria to decide a variance. Whether we sort of think that it fits in with a plan aesthetically or not probably isn't terribly impactful on their decisions. They've got their jurisdiction and don't really need us sticking an oar in on their proposals. But we'll see what the board has for a discussion. From my standpoint, when you get to the density considerations, the backdrop for that was figuring out what the land will support in terms of water, septic, drainage, and all those other things. And when you're on town water and sewer, you kind of taken away most of those problems anyway. And on a flat lot with some open space to it, you're not really going to have stormwater problems to deal with. And so you kind of haven't had the problems that you would think of from the density standpoint before. But again, that's really the zoning board's bailiwick. On density, building size doesn't change based on the density. If you wanted, this size building, but the zoning board said it can only be 16 apartments and not 22, still the same building, still the same roof, same parking lot, same rest of it, from a planning board standpoint. Other members of the board that have some comments or questions? Tom, you ready?
Yeah, I'm not really sure where to start. I was really disappointed to see this come forward, honestly, because I was here when you did the conversion of the office space to apartments. I didn't appreciate that. I thought it was an end run around the whole PUD program to have built a building and say, well, I can't rent it out, so I need to turn it into apartments in order to make this viable. You got that approval. You went forward with it. You have apartments there. So you've got apartments or houses all through this place right now. And you put a thing on the side that said, okay, we'll put our commercial out here underneath the power lines. And now you're coming back and saying, well, I want to build 21 more apartment units on there. And I don't feel that's in the spirit of the PUD at all. There isn't any commercial development, there's no retail, there's no anything that's been out there in support of this whole program. And I personally just don't think we're going in the right direction. And I understand that it's difficult to rent the space. I understand you must have known that to some degree when you walked into this program. Before I was involved with the planning board, this thing was approved. but I was sitting here when you came back to convert the commercial into apartments, and now you're trying to use that structure as justification for your density on the other one, that we have 21 apartments there. Well, that was the commercial building. It wasn't an apartment building. It got converted. It got an approval. You know, I don't think we need to say that that's there because we allowed that density. That's there because you came and said, I can't rent it and I need some relief, and you got your relief. So I don't think we should use that argument at all for the density. If it doesn't meet the density, it doesn't meet it, and that's the way we should go forward.
That was exactly my reaction when I opened the envelope, and then thinking about it a little bit more, wondering what we're after with PUDs. Confused my thoughts a little bit, but I was right there with you when I first looked at this. I was like, you know, this is supposed to be the commercial bit. But Alistair, comments? Questions?
I can only, I mean, I'm not really. I mean, I understand the point of the PUD, and yeah, we should try to uphold it if it's possible. But I do understand that that part of the town, because of the very relatively poor access to Manchester, in other words, if you recall, exit 12 does not have north-facing ramps on or off. I understand that anybody from Manchester coming this way has got to trek their way all the way down through all the traffic lights and all the rest of it. I
And
understand.
that's true. The airport access road is the closest thing to this.
Closest thing
It's
to
very
it.
close to it.
Well, I suppose so, but
It's extremely.
but yeah, but we're not winning that one. We're not winning that battle. Bedford and Londonderry are beating us head over fist, or whatever the word is. I mean, everybody's going to the Londonderry end or the Bedford end. I'm sympathetic. I don't like this idea. I wish it was commercial, but I do understand the applicant's problems. That's all I can say. I'm neutral on it.
All right. Nelson?
I pretty much agree with you, Bob, and with Tom on this. I think, you know, this is constructing from the ground up. It is a different situation than a building that was built for a purpose and then that purpose had to be changed. But in this case, we're starting from scratch. So I guess I would prefer to see it stay commercial. And but I'll leave it like that for now.
Dan, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I echo all my colleagues, but I'm going to take this into a little bit of a different direction. Just out of curiosity, well, let's start with the easy stuff first. Is this the storage you're talking about that is not going to be there?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's actually the northeast, not northwest, just so you know.
Yes, correct. Sorry,
Okay.
northeast versus south. Right, that's the northeast corner of it. You're
Okay, 'cause
correct.
the-
I'm sorry if I misspoke.
Okay, I was just double checking. Are you familiar with the groundwater contamination issues in Merrimack?
How do I say this?
PFO.
My history goes back 40 years in knowledge of things in Merrimack, from, as Mr. Disco well knows. You mean the recent ones or the old ones?
The more recent documented
Okay,
ones.
yes, I am.
Well, the reason why I just want to bring it up, you're literally about a mile away from St. Cobain.
Correct.
There's a current construction that has a very high elevated levels of PFOS, PFOA. And what they've had to do with any New Hampshire DES and getting certain terrain permits and monitoring wells and all sorts of things that need to be done, I would highly suggest, if you're coming back to here with this set of plans, that you include that type of data before even presenting this, because I mean, if you look at maps like this with monitoring wells, any kind of research you can get, the levels are so high that if you're not aware of that information, I would educate yourself before this project's even started.
Right. Notwithstanding the fact that it's a municipal water service site, but I do understand your point.
Well, it's not just about the municipal water site. I understand that. It's more about the movement of soil and dirt and construction that's going to release all these chemicals into the air that, frankly, I don't like.
Yeah.
So I would highly educate yourself on that, and just wanted to make you aware of that.
Yeah, no, thank you. The point is well taken.
It's a particularly good point on this site because of the size of it. there's probably not much DES permitting that would be required to do this development. I don't know if I don't know of any DES permitting you'd need to build this. Neil, do you have any comments or questions? No.
Perhaps alteration of terrain if it's 100,000 square foot, but I doubt it.
100,000 square feet is it's almost your whole
almost 2
site,
acres,
so,
and it's,
yeah. 100,000 is
2/3 of the site will
2/3,
probably not
yeah.
be touched as a practice, especially if we don't go into the back with the construct.
Well, a
with
bunch of it
storage
is
areas.
underneath that
Yeah.
Well-
power line easement where you're not going to do much.
I mean,
Right.
the main reason why I bring it up is I know the site that's closer to Gobain that's doing the work now. I mean, there's a very public letter that's been sent to them about removal of soil and the potentials to cause an environmental catastrophe. All right, so I'm just letting you know that that's there. Like it's there. So if you remove soil and bring it somewhere else, they're saying that New Hampshire DES is saying that you could be responsible for something catastrophic. So,
Yeah, and that's a typical situation in almost in any development in a sense. This is a unique situation where you have the awareness of that circumstance a mile ahead, but.
well,
but-
there's
but
no excuse,
disposing-
is what I'm trying to say.
No, no, but disposing
there's
of-
plenty of documentation that says that this is in the wells and in the
Sure.
soil.
I
So
hear. Yeah.
if you're not aware of that, I would
Oh, no, I'm aware, yes.
educate yourself because there's going to be some issues if you don't.
Thank you.
So, my colleagues seem to be less equivocal than I was on this question about keeping the commercial element of the PUD versus thinking about what the PUDs are really intended to do, and does that make sense going forward? I guess the one thing that I would add to what I've said already is, let's hear from the neighbors. And I think that their concerns about traffic and movements and things will lean towards one kind of development or another. And it may be that compared to having a restaurant there with all of that traffic coming and going and noise at night and all of that, that there may be a sense that this is a better choice than doing commercial or daycare or those things. And maybe it isn't. Maybe they, I mean, so with that in mind, if the board doesn't have any comments or questions, do you have some more that you want to add?
Can I
Mr.
add-
Bova
I'd
just
like
had
to
one thought.
Explain something first before the board. I am not the original owner of the property. I just want to make that clear. I bought it from the original owner who did originally do the development, the PUD back in the 90s. In 99.
Yeah.
I don't currently own that piece now either. They own it. And since 1999, since this PUD has been done, there has been multiple restaurants that have run away, office space that no one has booked. I don't know how long his plan was 2013. No one has moved in.
Yeah.
And I believe the exit 13 thing, everybody thought exit 13 was gonna go great, but nothing from us down the building to the end of the
Yep.
Merrimack line is gonna happen until that pump goes in.
Let me offer a couple of comments for that. First, as your first point indicating you weren't the first developer of it, and I assume you're bringing that forward because you didn't make the promises about commercial development and all of that.
I
somebody
wasn't
else
the
did.
one who applied for the PUD, for the
Sure, yeah,
apartments.
no,
a few years
understood,
ago.
and even if you were, it doesn't, I don't hold that against you in terms of having brought a past plan forward, but I do take your point that it wasn't you that did it. Obviously, if you acquire the property, you acquire it with its history. The thing with the PUD approved whenever it was approved, the applicant that brought that forward, at whatever point they brought it forward, had a proposal about commercial and residential, and it may be a fact of life that the commercial isn't viable, but I don't know that entitles you to automatic relief or a equitable argument for relief.
Right.
It's part of the deal you made in 1993 or whenever not you, your predecessor made in the past. However, I think that I want to be influenced mostly by what we hear from your neighbors about what they would like to see on that site, at least me personally.
Chris,
So-
real quick, what pump are you talking about? What does that mean?
The pump station down the bottom of the road.
For what?
That's
Sewage
like,
or-
It's on one of the upgrades for the town.
Okay. Is it water?
The sewer pump.
Okay.
Because after Crosswoods, we have no more sewer down the hill. That's
Gotcha.
accessible.
Gotcha, okay. I didn't know what that meant.
Gotcha. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's let the folks who may come have the access to the table if they can sit and make their comments, as well as to sign in. Thank you for that. Okay, let's open up the floor to any abutters or citizens who wish to weigh in.
Don't fight to be first. First come, first served.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, Bob. Tom, gentlemen, let me sign in real quick. All right. All right. So my name is Patrick Dwyer. I live at 22 Kearsarge Lane, which is in a butter to the south. I'm also the current chairman of the zoning board for Merrimack. I know some of you I do not know. There are multiple concerns with this plan. I know this is a conceptual meeting, so obviously you are correct. There are concerns regarding traffic. There's, in fact, a lady here tonight who was in a very serious accident because of the amount of traffic that DW has increased. 22, well, you have 21 apartments, 2 cars in each apartment. That's actually 42 extra cars potentially coming in and out, not to mention how many are in the office space. That's a lot. Right now, taking a left-hand turn out of there is, you almost take your life in your own hands because the car's coming up the hill. The state's not going to put a light there, and the traffic is only going to increase when we put in the 250 plus 300 apartments that are going in, and that's phase 1 of the project down the road. And we can't anyone's been down Daniel Webster Highway, you can't widen it. There is no, without taking out significant amount of property from businesses and homes along Daniel Webster. So it may not seem a lot adding another 21 apartments, but right now I'm kind of tracking 5 large projects that are already in process. We have the Homestead project, which is 250 plus. We have 45 apartments going in across Merrimack 360. The complex at Cinemagic, which is 400 plus apartments.
Not quite that many, but it's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, 300. And then about 150 plus going in for the mixed use over at the outlets. It's a lot of apartments. It seems like Merrimack needs more homes. And I know there are, and I know having been on zoning, I've approved a couple of small developments that have been put in via subdivision of lots. I also know that there has been a couple of folks that have taken some of the older homes and have remodeled them into multifamily homes. Do we need more apartments? I mean, I understand that the apartment with the building before, and it was mentioned, it was brought up, was an office building. For relief, and I was on the zoning board. I was the chairman when that was approved. It made sense because it was about probably 30% occupied over 15 years. So for relief, it made sense to actually convert that. But it doesn't make sense to, as Tom had pointed out, to use that as an argument for putting in a building in the same size. The other thing is that according to, and you can check it out, I checked it this morning, NewEnglandCommercialProperty.com, there are 15 plus locations in Merrimack for open office space equal to over 201,000 square feet of available office space in Merrimack currently, based on this website. Not including commercial, not including retail, and not including, not including industrial, not including commercial, industrial, retail, and then open land that could be built. And we haven't filled those spaces, and we're going to add another. I mean, yeah, okay, so it's, 1,500, 3,000? But so really, we need more office space. We haven't filled what we have. And then, one of the criteria that we use in zoning, diminish of property values. I think that you're going to see not only a diminish of property values from the people on Kearsarge cul-de-sac, because we're going to be looking up at and we're losing trees, but you're going to look at, when you drive into Crosswoods Path, it's all lined with trees. and it gives people a community, it adds an aesthetic to the environment, that it's appealing to the people that want to live in that neighborhood and people that want to potentially buy and move into that neighborhood. And it's not just for the houses, but for the apartments as well. As far as, we had Eversource, I keep saying PSNH. Eversource went through and clear cut anything over 10 feet. And they did that, they're doing it all over Merrimack. And I get it, power lines, I get that for safety. But that took down a lot of the trees that are there. And so you're now talking about building an apartment complex there. And it just seems like, you're gonna start tearing down all these trees, this is Merrimack. Everybody here lives in Merrimack because it's a town. We don't want to be a suburb of Manchester. We're not a suburb of Nashua. This is a town. And we start to lose the charm of the town. We start to lose some of the aspects of the town when we start to destroy a lot of the green spaces that are around us. You ask me what I think that should be done. Excuse me. You ask me what I think should be done. I think it should be there. It would be better served to be a green space, walking trails, dog park, call it whatever you want. But I think we need more of that. I think we need less necessarily apartments and office spaces. We have a plethora of them. What we need is more community town facilities and things to that nature. I think that when they start tearing down those trees, it's going to be a lot more noise from the road for everybody living down in not only the condos up front, but also down in the neighborhood. I think that there's going to be an effect with sun and wind. We're already seeing a difference with the trees being taken down by Eversource. That we're already seeing a difference in the windstorms and noise, and then I really hate to see the rest of it. At the end of the day, I've read through all of it. I've been on ZBA for 9 years. I've read it. I know that it was zoned originally for a restaurant, never went in there. I know it was zoned for those office buildings, never went in there, which is, gotta be honest with you, with over 201,000 square feet of office space, kind of glad they didn't put those offices in there because half of them would probably be empty right now. But I guess I'm making an assumption on that. So I just think that there's other things that could be done with that land, whether it's commercial and the whole argument about PUDs, PUDs, I guess that that's something for the other day. But I think there's other things that could be put in there that would be more beneficial to the community that's right there. The people that live in that community, they don't want a Starbucks there. They don't want an apartment. They don't want an office space. They want the quiet. They want the peace. That's why we live on the north end of Merrimack, and that's why we live in that neighborhood. So, that's it.
So, you live on Kearsarge, you said. Is that part of Crosswoods Path or one of the
Kearsarge
abutting?
Lane. So when you come down Crosswoods Path, you come to an intersection. If you take a left, that's Kearsarge Lane. That loops all the way down. There's a cul-de-sac at the bottom. So if I look out my backyard, go right up the hill, it's right there. It is also something else to point out when we talk about the geography of it, and you brought up about the PFOAs. That's not a level lot. If you have seen it, that is slanted and would definitely need to be leveled out. It is not a level lot by any means back there.
Sure. So, within Crosswoods Path, you're part of the condo association?
Mm-hmm.
Have they contacted these guys to see about acquiring the property and making it the walking trails that you want?
It's interesting. There's been some discussions to that, but nothing has been moved forward. Actually, the president of the association is here this evening. I believe he'll be speaking as well.
Sure. And obviously, the president association can only speak for himself unless the association's voted on something like that. But the reason for bringing it up is that the applicant has, as a matter of right, the ability to do commercial development there
Mm-hmm.
today. And the question is not the choice between open space, walking trail type space, or this. The question's between commercial or this.
No, and you're absolutely right. And I guess maybe I misunderstood when you're looking for opinions from the board. It's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I know the zoning ordinances, I know the town ordinances, and I know that the choice If I had my choice, it wouldn't be those, but I know that, lesser of two evils, weigh it out. I guess that's.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it doesn't have to be the lesser of two evils between the commercial and residential, but that third choice means that somebody that owns it has to make a decision to put it into that open space use, and that's why I was asking whether the condo association had thought about acquiring it. Or homeowner, whatever it is.
It's not something, it's something that I think conceptually has been thought about, but I don't think has maybe been brought into light and further discussed, but it is something that is conceptually has been thought about.
I don't disagree with any of the rest of what you said in terms of the character of the town and the desire for having that open space and liking trees and all of those kinds of things. It's just a matter of what we're allowed to regulate
agree.
when it's private property, so.
I agree.
Two quick,
Yes.
Mr. Dwyer. So you're a homeowner on Kearsarge, correct?
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned property value, right?
Mm-hmm.
Any homes for sale on Kearsarge right now, or in Crossroads Path at all?
No.
All right, so
I can't speak for that. I believe there is at least one home for sale. Nothing on Kearsarge at the moment.
well, I mean, in the Crossroads Path single-family home development area.
Yeah, maybe one or two.
One or two.
I'm
Okay,
not
so
sure off the top of
what
my
I'm
head.
trying to get at is it's not a bunch of homes for sale in the development. It's a pretty occupied single-family home, maybe a couple. So, okay.
Fairly mature development.
Fairly mature, yes. And also, you mentioned the traffic in and out of there. I don't disagree with you. Would you, in your opinion, feel like a traffic study for that spot be worth it?
I think it would be, but it's a state road in the town. The state is not, with a traffic light in half a mile in each direction.
I guess
Oh, yeah, they're not gonna consider
what I'm
traffic
trying to
light,
get at,
but-
what I'm trying to get at is, would it make you feel comfortable if a private company came in and said, based upon 21 apartments and a 15 or a 1,000-foot commercial development, you can expect X amount of cars between this time, taking a right, taking a left? Like, would that help you kind of understand what the traffic dynamic would be?
It would be interesting it would be interesting to see what the numbers.
Right, because I
look
mean,
out to
it's
be.
been done on other projects.
Mhm.
I'm not sure what our criteria is as a board. However, I just know it has been done, especially the one you talked about, Executive Park Drive, where there's multiple lights and all this stuff, and it's 700 pages worth. I mean, the Crossroads Path would be a very easy one to do with just one in, one out. And it'd be kind of interesting to see, because with some of the algorithms that the state uses, you can project 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, especially like you said, with all the new apartments being built on DW Highway, all those factors kind of get put into consideration. So personally, I would like to see it. I mean, I'd be curious.
I would agree but studying the traffic in and out of Crosswoods is one thing, but studying the traffic as well that is right outside of Crosswoods that's going back and forth on Daniel Webster.
Well, that would be
that's where
included.
you'd wanna
Yeah,
check.
that's
So
part
it
of
would-
the
yeah.
study looks at what the existing stream is.
Yeah, existing
Yeah.
stream, I know there's a few inputs, there's a few other roads, like going to Nothing But Good Times and stuff like that, but, like exit 13, like you said, when that was built, it was supposed to just be this amazing amount of cars coming in and out, and, I travel that road quite often, and it's not as impressive as it should have been.
I will.
I don't know whether impressive means a lot of cars or a few
Well,
cars.
I mean,
Which
I
one
like
did
the
you-
access.
I know-
don't get me
I know
wrong,
that
You're
I-
only paying, my 25-cent toll or whatever, or 75-cent toll, and sometimes you cut through there. But the fact that, I don't know. I just, once you get past Kearsarge, it feels like it just kind of, it opens up, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of commuting.
Well,
But
it's a-
again, that's just my opinion, and studies like this would show things like that.
I would reply to that by saying that there are times in which you're absolutely right. You can get right up that hill and there's really not much past, Crosswoods Path, and it bog down. It starts to bog down when you get down towards exit 12. There are also times, and I had it as recently as in the last 30 days, in fact, coming to the last ZBA meeting, I came off that exit at 6 o'clock at night and I was sitting on the hill for 5 minutes.
Sure.
Before I got up. So,
Gotcha.
I think it's, it depends on the day. I'd say you can do the study, But I would also say then do the study in about 4 or 5 months from now, after those apartments are complete and that traffic now starts to hit, because you're going to start having all,
Yeah.
what I'm saying is the traffic is going to increase on that road. Adding 21 more apartments, potentially 42 more cars
Yeah.
to,
I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
You're talking about the flow downstream. What's interesting is we see a lot of traffic reports, a lot of traffic studies, and they are really accurate
Yeah.
for what they say. Now, if you had someone sitting there that was a traffic engineer, they're never wrong. Things are always this, they can't predict everything, right? So
Right.
that one time there's an accident on Route 3, then DW Highway turns into a parking lot. I get that.
Yeah.
We talked about, during winter and school years and making the timing right and all these things, but they can factor those in. So it's actually a decent number that you can understand about taking that left-hand turn.
Be happy to see it.
Personally, I think it's interesting. I mean, it's
I-
one more data point for sure.
I would definitely be interested in seeing it.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
definitely would.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
be Something I
Appreciate it.
would see. Yeah.
I agree with Dan's comment about the sophistication that these traffic engineers have now, that they can factor in what'll come out of those 280 development or anything else that's on the board without having to wait to see it happen, because they know what a 280 unit apartment building looks like. And actually, when Dan talks about the accuracy, one of the recent projects that we had them go and find something similar in New Hampshire to what they were proposing and count the cars that come in and out of it and prove their accuracy with something that's actually exists on the ground somewhere. And, got a really good result that tied into the numbers pretty well, actually pretty favorably. There was less cars than in real life than what they were predicting in that particular development. So they're able to do that with some pretty good skills, and being only 21 apartments, it's not the most complicated traffic study in the world. It's not like not anything like doing the one at Flatley.
No,
So-
I imagine it wasn't. It wouldn't be.
But, thank you, Alistair, I'm sorry, I don't want to cut me off.
Patrick, you quoted a number of office space, or the amount of office space that is basically unoccupied in Merrimack. What you didn't mention is what the current situation of apartments in Merrimack. And the Department of Environment, the planning department, state planning people, and their meeting in April, pointing out quite clearly that if no new houses were built in this town, they would run out of anywhere for people to move in within 30 days. In other words, we are chronically, in the southern half of the state, chronically short of housing. People want to move into New Hampshire, but there isn't the space for them.
So now, Mr. Mullins, I will point out that I actually referenced 4 projects in place right now in Merrimack.
Yeah.
And that's just Merrimack. I know, for example,
I can tell you, you only named half of them.
Yeah.
There's actually about 1,200 housing units already approved in town.
Yeah.
In different places.
Some of which are not
And
being built.
I know that there have been discussions about places, a large complex down by the YMCA. I also know that Bedford has a couple of projects that are in the process of being looked at, and Nashua is also looking to expand and build it out. And I have read the studies because I do work in the staffing side professionally, so I do know that there's a shortage of housing in New Hampshire. Just don't think that Merrimack should have should pick up all of that slack for the housing.
We're not.
Given the fact that with this, but I do understand what you're saying, and I do see that, yes, you want to continue to grow, but I mean, at what point do we overgrow? What point are we no longer the town of Merrimack, and now we're a suburb of Nashua?
Well, I don't know if I'd call us a suburb of Nashua or a Manchester, but actually, when you compare town sizes in New Hampshire, we're already in the top 10 for the number of people, the amount of land, the value of land, the jobs, the businesses. We're like 7th, 8th, and 9th on all of those lists. New Hampshire just doesn't have very many big cities, so
Right.
Manchester, Nashua, Concord, Portsmouth, and then you start to get into towns our size, Bedford, Londonderry, Merrimack, and all of that, so. Yeah, and that's not a bridge we crossed last week. That's
Yeah.
been the way we've been for quite some time.
No, well,
thousands and thousands, many more thousands than the ones that we've got here, are what the state determines that's needed just to support the existing workforce growth that they foresee. Not that we have to supply that at all. But we do have approvals for everything from single-family developments out in the country on cluster subdivisions with a bunch of open space to apartments, to condominiums, senior housing. I mean, we've got everything in the spectrum. I think the only thing that hasn't been proposed here in any volume, and thank goodness, is manufactured housing. But other than that, every variety of housing is on the table in some form or another, to keep that character question that you were talking about before, about what are people looking for? Are they looking for apartments? Are they looking for single-family housing, condos, small footprint, big footprint? There's opportunity for all of it here.
Yeah, so I guess if you're gonna put it back into residential use up there, would probably, single-family homes would probably be better. But again, there is an aesthetic value there that I think will be lost when that is, if that is approved and that's put in. And you do bring up a good point about, is there another use for that land if it was owned by someone else? And that's a good point, and it's definitely worth further investigation into. But thank you, I
Understood.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for visiting with us. We don't get to see the zoning board very often. I know that you're here in your individual capacity
Yep.
and not speaking on behalf of the board, but thank you for coming and listening to our presentation and offering us the feedback.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a
So-
good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Patrick? Are there other butters who wish to weigh in? Yeah, please come forward. Take a minute to settle in and sign in on the clipboard, and then when you're ready, just introduce yourself and tell us. What's that?
Pen?
Oh, yes, of course. You can just leave that one on the table there. I got another one. Okay.
How you guys doing this evening? My name's Chris Godso. I'm actually the president of our homeowners association.
Thank you,
There
Chris.
are two associations there, but we own the roads and the common areas. So there is a condo association. That's why we were trying to say that there was
Both,
both
okay.
of them there. I had a couple of questions because I was looking at the plan. Is this the right one? So we have, I saw in the bottom corner they wanted to do storage. We have a storage unit facility right beside ours that abuts
They're
us.
eliminating that. You don't have to
That's
argue
all
more about
eliminated.
That's awesome, thank you. Which is really good. I was just gonna bring that part up, but I noticed also that there's an easement on our road, and that's not a town road. And I've gone through all my notes, and I've been the president for eight or 9 years now, and I cannot find anywhere, even in any of the lot plans, I know there's an unofficial map, this one here at least shows the easement for the condos that are there now, but there is not another easement off of our road. And I'm seeing that.
You mean not the PSNH power line
No,
easement?
I'm
but-
talking actually for them to cut into our road on Crossroads Path coming down the hill. You'll see access easement, sorry.
Oh, access, so that, you mean for them to be able to do a curb cut or a driveway cut?
Correct.
Sure. That would have been part of the original PUD approvals to allow them to have that access and actually require them to have that access off of that road.
But how come I can't find it on the other one that was filed from when it was originally done? I'm,
So probably when they were originally done, they're in common ownership and you don't have easements with yourself in
Okay.
common ownership. So it's probably it, but I don't know. I haven't researched the records. So, somewhere there should be a record of it. You're right, that it's a good point.
and I can't find it.
I haven't looked and, you know, it's certainly for the applicant to come forward and to show that they've got the right to use the road. I can tell you that it exists somewhere. I just don't have it or don't know where it is.
Part of my concern why I'm also bringing that up is because of with the right-of-way for the power company,
Yeah.
and they've clear-cut a bunch of that land, we've got trees, like Patrick was speaking of our aesthetics, that come down into, that's a major selling point for our neighborhood. When you come down that hill and you see the I'm trying to forget the name of the trees, but remember the name of the trees, but the trees, the fence that we have, it looks very nice. And every drawing that I look at where they want to cut in is going to take out almost all of the trees that we have at the front end that we were allowed to keep from PSNH that have been there for about 18 years.
Okay.
So I'm concerned about that. And
It's a
then-
good concern, and thank you for that. We'll kind of take note of that. I don't know where their application will go from here. Whatever it would be, commercial, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, if they don't come forward again with anything, then it stays the way that it is. But
Right.
if they come forward with something, a landscaping plan will be part of what they would have to show us,
Okay.
which is not just what they would leave standing that exists today, but in the event that there isn't anything there or they won't leave the existing trees, they got to show us what they're going to put back. And considering the aesthetics is what that landscaping plan is all about.
Okay, that's good to know. The other part that I wanted to talk to you about was the grade of the ground there. You brought up removal of the dirt. I started looking into that part of it as well, so I was agreeing with you, so I was thankful that you brought that up. But that absorbs a lot of rain that comes down, and if we put that into pavement, the erosion, because it's all stone just past there, like we can't even plant some of the trees that we wanted to try to put in the area that we're allowed because it won't support it. The water runoff is amazing on the pitch that we have, where we get, even our walking paths, we have to go back every so often and regrade them because the erosion is so bad. So if we took out all that vegetation that would absorb it into the ground up top on that slope, it's all gonna go somewhere and it's gonna go downhill. So we're gonna end
Does
up
that
with-
pond does the pond there on Kearsarge, or,
Yep.
in the pond that's right there, does the water come from that site to there? Like, is there or is it?
It runs down into there. You'll see that, like, after the rain that we just had today, it's at capacity almost.
Okay. Where's the other water? Is just drainage from the street going there?
It's just drainage
Yeah,
from
that's
the,
what I
yeah,
thought.
it's from the streets coming down into that. What I'm fearful is that if we remove the vegetation up at the top there, and that water has to go somewhere without us diverting it somewhere else, the erosion that'll happen, and then it's gonna come down all into the backyards of the members that are on Kearsarge on that cul-de-sac right
Yeah.
there. And the reason I bring that part up is we had a problem with one of our retaining walls from the original build. It's collapsed because the water ran in behind it and pushed all the rocks out over time, and it collapsed. So I'm very aware of what potential could happen for our homeowners in that area. So I was definitely opposed to, when I saw the original design here, how it looks like all that's gonna go away. And that's very concerning for me.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting puzzle for them to solve if they do come forward with an application. So as a part of a site plan, if they came forward with a formal application, they'd have to show their engineering designs for how they're going to deal with stormwater and drainage and all of that. And not only do they have to kind of come up with some science or some solution that would deal with that, since they're not going to be able to, build drainage areas underneath the power lines because of the easement.
Yep.
They've got a limited footprint to try to figure out what to do with their
Right. And
stormwater.
And the other aspect of the 42 cars number that we were coming up with, just generalizing, just this week alone in preparation for this meeting, I've just been timing how long when I leave and how long when my wife leaves. She leaves about a half hour to an hour before me. She averages about 3.5 minutes to get off of our road. I average about 2.5 minutes is about where we're at right now, just with current traffic. I don't know, I'm very interested to see what the study would say coming back with, especially with all the other apartments going in further down, because that traffic is going to increase.
So when not that it really changes the math that you're talking about that much, but when
Yep.
you leave, do you turn left or right?
My wife goes left, I go right, so we
So-
have the perfect scenario for us to
Probably
tie it.
most of your 2.5 to 3 minutes is whatever the car in front of you is doing.
Correct.
You get to the front of the line, you're not 2.5 minutes
As long as it's not a
there,
school
but-
bus, I can get out pretty quickly. But if there's a school bus, I'll be sitting there for a bit.
Excellent.
But that's generally why I like that, where she's able to go one way and I can go the other. We can actually have a control versus a variable on the turning for the traffic.
Yeah, very good. Thank you
So.
for that. That's an important one to consider. Alistair, you have a comment on it?
I'm only interested, Chris, in that having been involved with this area, I didn't hear any of these criticisms in 1998 or in 2013 about the other developments which would have just the same effect on your land and drainage and all
So
the rest of it.
if I
Well, I
lived
heard
in the
them in
neighborhood in
2013.
99, I would have been here.
What
In
about 2013?
In 2013, I was not home when the letter came. I
All
was
right.
actually out of the country. on
All right.
vacation.
I just,
I
So
do-
otherwise, I would have been here and I would have
thank
opposed
you.
it then.
That's all I wanted.
I wasn't on the board in 1998. I was in 2013. I was the chair. But I do remember many of the neighbors talking about the traffic and the same
Oh, the
question
traffic.
about the access off of Crosswoods Path Boulevard. And the neighbors were suggesting that the development should access directly off of DW Highway, which,
Because they already had an address off of there,
yeah.
being
And
747.
all of those things were discussed and considered back then. So
Yep.
I remember the neighbors coming and talking about those same kinds of things, and the morning traffic in particular. There were a lot of people that came in 2013 and talked about that. So.
Yeah. So that was pretty much what I wanted to cover as far as the erosion, removing of the trees for the drainage, make sure that that got caught.
Yep.
Patrick pretty much covered everything else. You had brought up an interesting fact, whether or not we had considered purchasing the land. We have just started basically talking about it. So
Okay.
there was no formal discussions amongst the association or our members yet.
How many homes do you have down there in the
51.
homeowners? And I guess so the 51 of those, and how many are in the condo association?
I forget how many condos there are off the top of my head.
I heard somebody say 50
It's
odd.
56.
All right.
Thank you.
It still could make it a tough purchase, but even
Yeah.
dividing it among those number of people, that could be a tough thing to do.
Right.
And I don't even know if the applicant, what they're interested in, so. But
Correct.
Anyway, it's,
That's a different matter, I guess.
yeah, and, sort of, as a planning board, what we're allowed to do is consider whatever's put before us, not tell
Yep.
people to go re-engineer some solution for themselves. So, on buying or acquiring property, but thank you for that. Other comments or questions for Chris? Hey, thank you for the
Thank you all for
feedback
your
and the
time. I
clarification
appreciate
about
it.
the associations. I appreciate it too.
Thank you.
Moving forward. As before, take a second to get settled in and sign in on the clipboard, and then
Kindly.
when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. My name's Kevin O'Kelly. I live in 27 Kearsarge Lane. I am right across the street from Pat. Couple of things. As Chris correctly says, the plans for the community stipulate where the easements are. The easement is defined on page 9 of Crosswoods Path. The covenants of the association, there is no such easement for parcel 2, doesn't exist. That'll be an issue. Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate your observation about the type of development to go in here, commercial, otherwise. As Chris is getting at, a lot of the people that live in our community commute long distances, frequently to Boston. We leave early in the morning. If you put in a commercial establishment that doesn't open till 8:30, 9 o'clock, I can get in and out of my community, and so can a lot of others. As Dan correctly said, a traffic study may be required here to get a handle on not just the traffic in terms of its volume, but when it comes in, because that's going to be really important for our community. I think a lot of people in the apartments and the COA are probably in the same boat. They probably live by the same rules. So certain types of developments may work for us, others may not. Like a lot of people here, I'm very concerned about just the sheer number of apartments that are going in. That's not exactly revenue neutral for the town. A lot of apartments can mean a lot of kids, which is great, but God knows what this is all going to do for schools. Heaven only knows. The prior variance 3 years ago is an interesting point. The environment in that part of town has changed dramatically. It's going to change massively given the new development less than a mile from us. Again, a traffic study may get a handle on this, but I don't know. Coming back to the easement briefly, cutting into Crosswoods Path Boulevard is going to incur a certain amount of financial problems for us in the HOA. We have to maintain the road, since it's not a public road. I don't know if the town will take over the use of that road, if they, grant an easement over that. That's interesting. I would ask the developer if he's talked to the storage facility right next door, because if he simply connects his parking lot to the parking lot, the upper parking lot of that facility next door, he doesn't need an easement with us. He doesn't have to talk to us at all.
I can maybe simplify the discussion about easements a little bit.
Yes, sir.
So we don't grant easements or have the
Correct.
power to do that. Whatever that is, the applicant would have to demonstrate his right, and I assume that he can because there's been developments approved there in the past with the curb cut on Crossroads Path Boulevard. But either way, one way or another, we're not going to decide it, approve it,
No.
adjust it.
I understand,
The applicant
sir.
will have to either show it or not, and that really is
Yeah.
all there is to the issue.
Yeah, the easement for Crosswoods Path number 1, which is the site which was commercial and went to apartments. That's the one that has the easement described in the documents. That's the only one he has. Number 2 is the parcel across the street from Crosswoods Path, where there isn't any. I have the site plans with me. Let's see, prior variances, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, access to the storage facility is what I would look at, and like Chris says, I think we would be interested in what it would take to buy that area. And that's all I have, I hope. Okay. Oh, yeah, as you said, the PFOA is going to be massive. If you don't know, there's 51 of us in the community below, the apartments over here, and they're going to be digging up a massive amount of soil on top of a huge hill, right where, the runoff of this is going to end up in my neighbor's backyard. So, yeah, that's going to be fun.
Could I, Mr. Chairman?
Sure, Alistair.
Question?
Just not trying to criticise you, but I'm just going to tell you that the community development has statistics to show what the number of school kids resulting from 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom apartments, and that number is generally not very great. Majority of these apartments don't generate the number of school kids that you think it might, and then additionally, which the school board wouldn't mind if you did generate a few more kids, because they're constantly having to pull back on staffing because they haven't got enough kids to fill the schools. But I just giving you that as not a criticism, just a general comment.
Yeah, my only experience from that is looking at the traffic flow from the kids that go down to our bus stop.
Yes, I know.
And it did go up, but yeah, I can't, you're right, that's not necessarily a good selective sample. Good
The
point.
houses generate lots of kids, and we're grateful, but I don't think apartments tend to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But anyway,
that is true.
just a comment.
So I'll join Alistair in the first part of the comment. I don't know what the school board thinks about wanting more kids or not. I'll leave that question to them. But just like the science with parking, there's some science behind planning for the number of kids that'll be in a development. And they have different calculations based on studio apartment, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom apartments, single family, manufactured housing, condos, townhouses, all of these different choices. And the best example for what you might expect out of this is what is occurring at 1 Crosswoods Path, which is 21 odd apartments.
Yeah.
When we analyzed that, I think that the analysis said it'd be 4 or 5 kids, and it's actually 3 today.
That's probably right, yeah. Good point. Good point.
Thank you for the rest of your testimony and the information. I'm sympathetic to the idea of not changing the development, but others who wish to weigh in? You're used to the drill already. You know how to say.
You
Yeah.
don't have to tell me.
I listened. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Linda Feldeisen, and I also live at 27 Kearsarge Lane, and I'm one of the owners on Crosswoods Path Homeowners Association. I'm also a board member and I'm the treasurer on the board. So luckily for you, everybody else has asked most of the questions I was going to ask. So I just wanted to make a couple of comments. We talked about the exits that would be used and that we are very close to exit 13. But I'm a person who's typically gone south. So if you go up to exit 13 on a normal day when you can actually get out and the roads are normal and you go all the way around, you loop all the way around and come down to exit 12, it actually takes about 3 minutes longer. And if you do that at the commute time in the morning, the minute you get around on exit 13 onto the Everett Turnpike, you're immediately in a traffic jam. So it takes forever just to get down to exit 12. So I think most people would try to make the left and
Well,
go
12's
down
facing
to
the other
exit
direction,
12.
so you would go down from 13 down to 11. Because if you're going south from 13, you can't get off at 12.
Yes, but I meant to
Right.
get to where exit 12
Oh,
would
okay.
come into that
I gotcha, I
particular
gotcha.
exit, yeah. So, because the other alternative is you go down to exit 12 and get on at exit 12.
To go
which,
south. I got you.
even though you sit in a traffic jam, it actually is a lot quicker than sitting in the traffic jam right from almost the tolls
Yeah,
all
I
the way
agree.
down. So exit 13 it's really great when you're going north because you can go up to exit 13 and then you just make the right and come down again. But like everybody else, if you want to make a left, you're sitting there forever and ever. It seems like ever and ever just trying to get out. One of my concerns about being the treasurer on the Homeowners Association is even though that little cut into Crosswoods Path Boulevard is not very far down the hill, it's still using the resources that we have now for the road. And you have a lot of extra vehicles going in there. Not only will you have cars going in and out, you're going to have snow plows going there to do the plowing, you're going to have garbage truck removal, if that's the correct word in American, trash
Yeah.
removal, sorry, I think I've got that wrong.
No, you got it
the
perfect.
people who
It's
come
fine.
and empty the bins in English. And then also people doing deliveries, especially if it's commercial vehicles, commercial space in there. So there is going to be quite a lot of extra traffic coming in that's going to put a burden on that piece of the road, and I think there'll be a lot more maintenance that needs to take place, which is going to put up the costs there.
There could be, and again, I don't know the documents that give them the right to go onto Crosswoods Path or not, but I'd be really surprised if whatever documents give them the right to use it don't also obligate them to contribute to your costs of maintenance and repairs.
Yeah, well, right
But I
now-
don't know that, I'm just
Right now, they
supposing.
don't use any resources, so nobody who owns that property is paying any money, and I don't know that we have a way in the covenants to even recuperate money, so that is certainly a big concern. So I think one of the other questions I had was about the schools. So I didn't know if there was any thought as to where the bus stop would be, if it was going to be housing in there. I think the only alternative right now is if you went right along Daniel Webster Highway, you go to Society Hill, the bus stop that's there, or come down to our gazebo. And the gazebo and that common area in the middle of the pond and everything, that actually is the property of the Homeowners Association and not the condo association or the apartments. And so right now, the kids from the apartments do come down to the gazebo, which we really don't have a problem with. But if it's going to be more kids, and maybe it's only just a few, and I don't know where the apartment kids go to the bus stop now, but it's just extra cars. They bring the children down, they park the cars right around the gazebo. It's already a little bit of a traffic hazard there because we have 3 houses right there with little children, and so there's cars parked when people are trying to get on and off the buses, and I think it's only a matter of time before we have a great big accident there, and I really don't want to see somebody get injured. But if it's only going to be 2 or 3 children, then maybe that really won't make any difference.
The children don't take up much space, but if they come with cars and parents
Cars
parking
and
down there,
parents,
that's different.
exactly,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
And
Oh,
dogs, and dogs. And they'll probably be using the common land just because everybody else does, even people from Society Hill come over, but then we go and walk at Society Hill and walk in the apartments, so,
Yeah.
we can all allowed to do that. One of the things that I heard tonight that I hadn't thought of before is about the construction, what would take place with the actual construction. And now that really does make me nervous about the quality of the air while the construction's taking place, especially if all those PFOAs are being kicked up and PF whatevers. I mean, I'm not sure I'd want to go out without putting a mask on. I'm not sure I want to even be in the area. But that is a concern of mine, and that was not a concern before, so.
We made it worse. That's not really our goal, is to do
Yeah. But I love the idea of it being some type of common space that everybody could use, a park or something. I don't know how we do that, but that would be amazing. We could all go and work out there. So thank you very much. Oh, does anybody have any questions? Sorry.
Just
Linda,
one
thank
comment,
you.
Linda.
Okay.
Linda, just talk to me a little bit about the lights that went in there a couple years ago, and how much of a hassle that was, and if you cut into there, is that going to disrupt that, or what do you it was a big problem there, and I know it took a while to get rectified. So
With the lighting?
yeah,
Well, to be quite honest, I was not on the board at that time, but.
because you guys put in a lot of effort to.
Yeah, it was an enormous effort to get all those plans.
It was
through, as
gaslighting
far
at
as I
one
know.
point,
was
and then it was solar
gaslighting,
lighting, and then
it
now it's converted to electrical.
electricity.
Now,
And
I would assume if the clear cut is allowed and the electrical is disrupted in any way, that you'd be compensated for that. What are your thoughts?
I'm not sure that we, to be quite honest, Chris Godsoe and Kevin O'Kelly, who just spoke previously, were on the board at that time, and I don't remember who the third person was, but they did put an extensive effort into planning everything out, meeting with the right people to get the approvals to do that. I'm not sure we actually have any electrical lines going through on that side of the road.
Are the gas lines still there?
The gas lines are still there.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all on the other side of the road. But I'm speaking personally here, I think it would have been nice if we'd have had an extra light put on the curve, or one or two lights that we don't have and it wasn't in the plan. So that's a very good point that you made. If this is allowed to take place, we certainly I would think, need some extra lighting at that cut-in, because there is no lighting there now. There's lighting at the top. Have you been down there looking?
No, you're getting to exactly where I'm going. I used to live there. I used to live in Kearsarge.
Oh, you used to live in Kearsarge?
Yeah,
Really?
it's like 7 years ago. I don't live there now.
You
But
did?
yeah, a
Oh.
long time ago. I used to live on number 1. So I'm very familiar with the property.
You
That's
lived on number 1?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
about 2014. So it's been a while, or actually no, 2012.
Well,
so
we were living there then, so I apologize for not recognizing
That's
you.
okay.
So we
I got longer
really-
hair now than I used to. I got
There's
a
only
little,
51
I got a little
houses.
fatter, so.
Oh, you did? Oh, that's
yeah,
what it,
I
that's
got more
definitely
kids
what
and all
it
that
is,
stuff.
yeah.
But I just remember,
So did I.
remember the lights, and I remember driving by there a lot and seeing the trenching and being like, "What is going on here?" And I knew that was a huge project when I was there, and it seems like it's something you guys are proud of, because now you have light. I remember how so dark it was there.
It was.
When I first moved in, way back when, I was, geez, where are the lights in this place, And then now that you've gotten it, and now it's going to change, I think it's something you should think about. Just like you said, I'm trying to lead you that way. So
thank you.
that I think a couple more lights up in that corner would be, if this is something that does move along, is something that would be interesting to
Yeah.
add to that.
And it's actually quite expensive to install an additional light right now,
Right.
because we actually had been looking, we only have one light at the entrance, and we were looking at putting a second one there, and it's quite expensive just to put one more light in.
Right.
That's without stringing all the wires down to put a light in on the curve or at that entrance there.
Just little things.
Yeah, just little things, you're right. I'm glad you used to live there, that's very nice.
Thank you, Linda, for your comments. Other questions? Thank you very much.
Don't forget your pen.
Yes,
Oh, thank you. No pens, and now we have 2 pens.
it's okay.
Thank you.
Well, if there's anybody else that'd like to speak, while the next person's coming up, I'll comment that Dan, probably some of the older folks in the room think you're misusing way back when and a long time ago.
Fair enough.
That was about a half an hour ago.
To be honest, I actually don't remember the date I lived there, to be honest with you, which is scary. Maybe my mind's going to. I'm trying to think. My youngest was there 7 years ago. So 2012, 2011. First house I ever bought.
So please start off with an introduction and then tell us
So
what's
my
on your
name
mind.
is Natalia Bayramova. I also live in the neighborhood. It's 26 Crosswoods Path. Like people previously said, you're kind of lucky I'm not the first because everything is pretty much covered, but I do want to comment on a bunch of things. First, I agree with Mr. Cohen about using the other apartments, or actually not using other apartments as example of why we should have apartments on the other side. I feel like it's a totally different situation. It was, just empty offices. I used to walk my dogs there all the time. There's like nobody there. And actually, when I bought a condo for my parents, the only office there was the the person who did their loan application. There was nobody in that building. So that's totally different situation. Also, the reason why it's totally different, back then, as Patrick mentioned, we did not have all these apartments come in everywhere around us and big numbers. I mean, 21 apartment as opposed to 150 or 250, that's a big difference. So if Merrimack is in lack of housing and we need more apartments, there's plenty. The 21 plus for the whole Merrimack, that's not going to make a difference. 400, 250, 150, that I get. So that's why I don't feel like it's comparable to the other side. Also, on the other hand, people did mention storage area. So if they end up having their apartments, basically right now, you're looking at our nice neighborhood, some other condos, nice trees, there's a pond. Their apartments, half of them are going to be looking at the storage because it's really, really close to it. So it's a little bit of a different situation. I do have a question. I don't know if they can answer, but the applicant mentioned that they're leased. To me, I was actually wondering how many of those are leased because it doesn't seem like all of them are leased, but maybe they can answer that question. So putting that to bed. The biggest thing also, what Dan mentioned is the digging up all this stuff, like why is this different now? Well, it's a big difference now because we know about all these contaminated areas, water, soil, and yes, we're on town water, but there's wells and there's mixes and, you guys, it's a total mess. And like Dan mentioned, Homestead, even right now, there's all these things like they have the soil, but it's on the land because they can't remove it because it's contaminated. And, it's just, so to me, that's probably the biggest concern, all the construction, and it is kind of down the hill, and the erosion, and all the stuff that's gonna come up. So if it does happen, and that's really for the applicant, I really urge them to do all sorts of research and, environmental engineering, whatever, you name it, because we're all gonna be, like Linda said, breathing the air and all the stuff that's gonna come up from that. Also, here comes the traffic. I am the lady who was in an accident on that road. And so I totaled brand new car, was not my fault, unfortunately,
No, that's fortunately, not unfortunately.
No, unfortunately for the car, the car was totaled, but thankfully for the airbags. So go
I don't want to pry into the details of the accident, but was it turning onto DW Highway or down within the development?
No, it was the left turn. So this is how this road works, you guys.
Yep.
You go in, right? Like as I'm facing you, I'm going left. There's people coming this way, and there's a hill, so you can't really see. Also, there's sometimes people coming to the neighborhood, and then doubly can't see, and they think they should let you go, which they shouldn't, because we actually have a stop sign. So they're waving to you to go, and you waving to them, I can't go because I can't see behind you. So it's a constant battle, and fingers at my direction, because once I did have the accident, I'll tell you what the fault was, but it was considered then technically my fault because I had the stop sign. But what was happening, I was turning left, someone was going straight, but he had his blinker on, like he was turning to cross his path.
Okay.
And I never believed them. There was the one time, and I paid for it. I thought, he's just gonna turn and we're gonna do this. No, what happened was he just took the whole front of my car.
I'm sorry to hear
and
the
that's all
accident,
right.
but thank
It was
you
a
for
New
sharing.
Year's Eve too. It was a lovely day. Anyway, so I did call after that. I called maybe 3 times, in the different, and as you were mentioning, when I did not know about the 2013 meeting, just happened about the apartments and everything. So I did call the state about the traffic light, and the answer was like, well, we probably should do a traffic study. And they said, yeah, do one. Oh, well, maybe, and then when the apartments, we know they looked into it. People looked into it, there were comments, it was decided that the 21 apartments is not gonna affect the traffic, sorry. So that's kind of what has been happening. And I would love to see a traffic study, definitely. And so I lived in it from 2007. So I can 100% with the exit 13, that road, DW Road, is way busier because people, go around. I don't know what it is, but it's a way, way busier. So you're on that light, considering all those crazy things, it's just too many cars. Forget the hills and the people waving at you. Then you add snow, forget it. You have the snowbanks with our huge snow, you can't see anything. I mean, what I usually do if I'm desperate, I turn right, I go at that stupid self-storage, turn around there, and turn left there, because at least there's no hill and I can see further. And if it's a snowbank, I can see further. So adding any more cars, I mean, right now it's bad. Adding any more cars, and like Alinda was saying, and then, people going in and out with, furniture deliveries, UPS deliveries, all that stuff. We 100% need, I totally support Dan on that, the traffic study. I think it's at least the traffic study and the environmental study that has to be part of it.
Traffic studies within our jurisdiction, environmental studies aren't, but I get it.
Right, well, I'm assuming he's listening, the applicant, so just, I'm putting it out there.
No, I get it.
Also, I do want to comment, of course, ideally, I love the trees, I love the neighborhood, it's a great neighborhood. Ideally, yes, I don't want anything in there. And when you say, well, can you buy it? I would love to buy it. I'm not on the board, but I'm just going to guess we do not have the money to buy that land. Just a guess. So it would be great, but I don't think it's feasible at all. So, as you were saying, well, is it commercial or residential? Then I think I would rather see a commercial. Maybe the times are a little bit different since there are so many apartments, and maybe I know someone said that 13, Bedford, it's not that great. I don't know. It's been happening. Bedford's been building all these little offices. I don't know. Maybe we'll do better this time than the other time. So basically, if I have to pick, as you were saying, the lesser of two evils, I would rather
I think
pick.
Kevin made the same point about the
Yeah.
timing, even if there's traffic associated with commercial, if it's off-cycle from the residential timing, it doesn't
Exactly.
really make
That
it
was a
worse.
very good point, because that's when I go. I go at the, and like as Linda was saying, you take the 13 during general time, there's nobody there. You take it at 8:30, forget it. You're there for half an hour before you even get to 12. It's important. And also with the, again, Homestead apartment, exit 12, there's only one. That traffic is gonna only increase the whole DW highway anyway, because there's just no other way to get,
Yeah.
north. So, I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I can't remember. So,
Well-
unless you have questions. And thank you, I know there was, the lights. Yes, so thank you bringing up, that's actually good and bad. I didn't even think of the lights. The problem with the lights, what we had, because originally it was condos and the homes were, way, way back, it was one owner. So the gas, we paid for the gas together. And then when we wanted to, when they were switched, we still paid for the condos. The lights, the gas lights that are at the condos, we still were paying for that. So when we wanted to switch to electric, there was a whole big deal, because they're like, well, we don't want your electric lights, so you're paying for our gas lights. So there's a whole big
I
kind of
getcha.
a mess. So, but now, so there's a very nice lights, electric, and we do have a loan, so they were expensive. So, as you were saying, to dig it all up and have something happen to them, or an even more expense to that, that's definitely a concern that I didn't even think of. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all your comments. I don't have any, and other people have questions? Thank you so much for it.
All interesting.
Others?
Good evening. I just want to let you...
Name, please, sir.
Oh, Richard Naveau, 29 Kearsarge Lane. Sorry.
I'm sorry, say your name again, I wasn't paying attention.
My name is Richard Naveau,
Richard,
Neveux.
Thank you, Richard.
29 Kearsarge Lane. My property would actually be the closest to this new development.
Okay.
And I echo Patrick's, Chris, Kevin, Linda's, Nash's, and Natasha's concerns, all of them. Traffic. I'm worried about the 2.3 acre variance going to 3.1. How close is that going to be to my property line? Are they going to be taking down all the trees? One of the reasons I bought this property was for the aesthetic value and how private and beautiful it was in that cul-de-sac in that corner. It's like I'm in my own little nature world back there.
Yeah.
And now when I find out tonight, by removing all that soil and the potential contaminants going in the air and the erosion of the ground, that's all going to come right down my hill because I'm at the bottom of that hill and I'm the closest one to that development. And I've got 4 children.
Yeah.
Okay? I actually have 6, but 2 are out. Okay? But I'm extremely concerned, as everyone had already stated. So I'm just real quickly, again, the contaminants in the ground soil, the water runoff, erosion, the density variance, how much of a footprint is that going to take up and get to our home association boundaries?
It doesn't give them any more footprint, the variance that they're looking for. It doesn't change their footprint or
No, I'm
the
just
size
curious
of
how
their
the
property.
footprint sets up and how many trees they're going to be removing.
Yeah, that's separate from the variance as far as what they clear on their property. All the variance does is tell them that they can have more apartments in their building than it would ordinarily
Okay, that's
be
what the
allowed.
density variance is?
Yeah.
Okay.
It gives
I
them
didn't know.
more units, more people.
Okay. Well, like I said, Patrick, Chris, Kevin, Linda, and Natasha have said it all, and I've just said my critical concerns.
So very important concerns, especially obviously if it's going to be very, very close to you. I think that, I don't know what the applicant will do with the feedback that we give them tonight, but obviously always be a part of the presentations and keep after the applicant as we go through a process, if there is one, to make sure that they've addressed how all of those things would occur through construction and protecting all those interests. So,
Thank you.
does anyone else have any comments for Richard? Questions? Neil?
During the, when they started clearing the easement for the power lines, did it take away a lot of the trees?
I'm in that northeast quadrant where they were going to probably put that storage facility, I believe.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now here on Google Map, and I see the 2 homes on the end of the cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
And it looks like the easement comes right out alongside the property. The power lines.
Yes.
Yeah, they cleared all that out recently.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. That's all. I was just trying to get a feel for,
Getting
you
his
know.
bearings.
Yeah.
Thank you for Richard.
Thank you.
Other abutters wish to weigh in? Come on forward, please.
Is this on? Yeah,
It is.
yes. Good evening, I'm Donna Bailey. I live at 5 Crosswoods Path Boulevard, Unit B4. So I'm here representing just myself, but I happen to be on the board as well. I was here for the 2013 meeting, if that's the date that when the discussion was held in terms of them being approved for what was thought to be, professional office buildings. And at the time, the discussion ensued about many of these same topics. I don't want to be repetitive, but one of the decisions that got made is that they were allowed to do a curb cut, not on from DW Highway, but onto Crosswoods Path Boulevard itself. And that curb cut would be located pretty much directly across from my building, Building 5. And we had just expressed concerns at the time about the orientation of those buildings would be, the back of the buildings would really be facing, the condos, and the front facing would be, I think, going down the hill this way. So the concerns we had about, we don't want to be living like on the end of an airport runway, with lighting pollution. But I agree as well that it's very dark, not enough lights were put in when they changed over to the lighting system that's there now. And so additional lighting, just from a safety concern, is definitely, I think, a critical consideration. From the condo association, we actually pay into the homeowners association a monthly fee for probably insurance, snow plowing, landscaping, everything that goes on with Crosswoods Path Boulevard as a private road. So I just wanted to clarify that piece. And I think from a traffic standpoint, the concerns I have are that nobody has yet mentioned is when you're coming up, we headed southbound, you come up a hill, and that left-hand turn lane is a blind lane. You don't really see it. So as you have a lot of people that are coming northbound, like heading toward Manchester, there's a tendency, as we're slowing down, to turn in, because it's almost like a T drive, like a blind drive, as you will. It's really hard to navigate getting into that roadway. You've got cars that are cutting around you in a no-passing lane, and they're coming head-on into a car that's going to be sitting here. I'm just waiting for the head-on, collision. But there have been, some accidents out there just this morning, knowing I was coming here tonight. It took me 15 minutes to be able to get out of Crosswoods Path Boulevard and with the traffic just to get down to Bedford Road so I could get onto the exit 12 ramp. So just that congestion piece there. I don't believe in just addressing problems. I like to be solutions-oriented, and I think that there's a very easy solution, because I think getting traffic lights in there is probably never going to happen. And that having been said, there's a traffic light right now up by 7-Eleven, and there's a traffic light that's down at the end of the access road. It's state-owned property. These things are electronically programmed. You synchronize the timing of the lights that they both stop and turn red at the same time. That would stop traffic, such that every 3 minutes or every 5 minutes you've got cars that are stopped, so that it gives people the opportunity to be able to come and go a little bit easier out of Crosswoods Path onto DW Highway. And I think another component in terms of, I was dubious about the apartments when they were first built, but much to our surprise, we're the closest to the apartments. I think a lot of professional folks live there. There's not a lot of noise, not a lot of, issues that we're neighborhood watch property, and I think that we've been able to coexist pretty peacefully, but to me, again, it's just if there's the addition of, at what point becomes the tipping point in terms of how we're going to evaluate the traffic impact when we've got 21 more vehicles coming in and out. So I'm not opposed to the apartments. I just think that they need to be built in such a way that all of these factors are taken into account, with safety and traffic being paramount among those considerations. So that really is what I really wanted to talk about, and to provide a solution in terms of it being maybe a creative option to maybe address some of the traffic piece. And when they're doing the construction, whatever that turns out to be, I think there has to be a provision for cutting that land that's a little hilly, that does block traffic, as somebody had said earlier. When you get snowbanks there, when you've got hay growing up, whatever it is, it just takes a very minimal amount of obstruction to be able to block your view, and you absolutely can't see what's coming at you up that hill. I purchased a new car, and I intentionally purchased an SUV just so that I would have the visibility to get in and out of that road, and there were days when I can't even see what's coming up that hill, and it's just becoming worse, not better, and I think especially with those apartments going down in behind Homestead. So those are my primary comments and remarks.
Donna, thank you for your comments. I agree with your assessment that the state's not going to put a traffic light in there, and frankly, you'd be surprised at how much mischief a traffic light causes. They're really not the solution that sometimes people think and hope that they are. They end up kind of creating traffic not only on DW Highway, but surprisingly, a traffic or signalized intersection has as many or more accidents than some of the unsignalized intersections, because people stop thinking. When the light tells them to go, they go, regardless of whether they could see a car coming in the other direction and all that. So sometimes signalized intersections aren't great.
And also, Mr. Chairman, when it goes red, they don't believe it means red. They continue to run the lights.
Yeah, very much so. But also, as you put lights in near each other, they start to interact with each other and cause traffic to back up further down DW Highway, and really slow your ability to get into your place from wherever you're coming from. But your comment about synchronizing the two lights, I like the concept, and I think that it's interesting. I happen to know from hearing about a different development where we're doing some synchronized lights that it's not a flip of a switch, but if they could do it and gain that advantage, you're right that it would create a good gap in the traffic for you. In fact, where we approved the new bus depot up DW Highway next to where Vault Storage is, the light at the Shaw's north of there actually creates these huge gaps in traffic where those buses can get in and out with almost no trouble at all. And it's the same kind of thing that you would be talking about there. I have no idea what it would take to actually get the state, because those are both state traffic lights, to try to think about synchronizing it. I don't know if it's sort of, what's that?
Not a prayer.
Not a prayer, says Nelson. I always think that it's worth trying these kinds of things, but it's a difficult one. When I say that's the state section, DW Highway north of Bedford Road, which is where exit 12 is state-controlled segment of DW Highway. They control how it's built, how it's lined, how it's striped, how wide it is, where the turning lanes are, whether there's sidewalks on it, and all of that stuff. The middle section of DW Highway from Bedford Road down to the Common Man is town-controlled by an agreement with the state. And then again, south of Common Man is another section that we don't have any say over it. We don't put lights on it. We couldn't control the traffic and limit those things. It's just not within, not just the planning board, but town of Merrimack doesn't have the jurisdiction over those, so.
Just as an aside, I met with, she's the chief of police now, but Denise Roy, when she wasn't chief of police, just kind of a meet and greet with the police department, and brought up the topic of maybe thinking about changing certain lights in town to just blinking yellows during key commute times, absent the critical intersections where you've got traffic, is a way to keep traffic flowing on DW Highway. But I would also add that, that this isn't just a weekday problem during key commute times. It's becoming an increasing problem even on the weekend, Saturday, Sunday. I'm amazed by sitting there and counting 30 or 40 cars coming one direction, 30, 40 cars coming another. And I guess the last comment that I would want to make is that this is the only road that we have for getting in and out. We have no other option for getting in and out of that location, whether it's the homeowners, the condos, the apartment, whoever goes in on that piece of property. It's the only sole access to, so we don't have any other options. So
and I can tell you from working with the fire department on other developments, the fire department would never let us do that again with one.
There's access in the back of for fire trucks.
There's an emergency.
Yeah.
Down by Sprague Society.
Yeah, but not for the
residents.
traffic.
Not for us.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
for the residents, no, but there is access for fire trucks.
So it's just one more consideration.
Yeah. You're right, when you talk about sitting there and watching 30 or 40 cars go by, that's one of the symptoms of those traffic lights that are nearby. So when they stop the traffic for you and you get a gap for a minute, the trade-off is when that light turns green, there's 50 cars behind that light that are now bumper to bumper.
I
going
understand
right
that, but
past
if
you
you
and you can't
synchronize
turn-
and stop at both directions, that has stopped traffic, with the exception
Yeah,
of cars
yeah, if they
coming
were
in and
timing
out.
you
I
doing
just
both at
think
once, that'd
that
be
it's
great.
probably the only viable solution that we have left to consider at this point, so for what it's worth. Those are the key points that I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donna, for your comments. Other comments or questions? That's it, we got everybody? Well, come on back up where the microphone is, because the folks at home can't hear you from there.
This is real quick.
You don't have to be quick, just whatever you want to say. You don't have to sign in again either.
Okay. One thing, if this were to go through and they were to cut all those trees down at the top of my hill, okay, the last thing I thought of when I bought this home was to have an apartment building looking down upon me. So that, I think that is critical to my privacy, and it will ruin my property value. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Okay, other abutters or citizens that wish to weigh in? Okay, then we'll close the public hearing. We'll invite the applicants to come back to the table. I'm sure that the board will have some questions of you, and you may want to begin by kind of responding to as much of whatever you heard as you choose to, understanding that this is a conceptual design, and you could take all the things that you heard back with you home and see what it does to where you take your next steps from here.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and for the record, Brad Westgate with Chris Bova. We came here to listen more than speak, I've made more notes than I typically do, but I always make a lot. And I've absorbed the comments both by the board, the questions by the board, and the various abutters and neighbors, and we appreciate hearing all those comments because it gives us a sense as to what the concerns are. I won't go into an analysis of how we may approach dealing with those concerns, but the board is, of course, well aware that matters that come before you in a site plan application have to deal with erosion control, have to deal with details of landscaping, lighting, access, traffic studies conceivably. All of those kinds of things are analyzed fully before any presentation that's made to you. And the board is also, you specifically, Mr. Chairman, are of course correct in the issue of access easements, rights, those private matters that go between property owners that we have to convince ourselves exist, because there's no point in going through a project if you can't get into it the way you want to get into it. So we're well aware of those kinds of issues. We're well aware of how they have to be approached and what has to be presented to the board to deal with them, and the give and take that you have with the board on what level of analysis and detail has to be presented. I think we already have the message, I think, Mr. Chairman, that the board, I don't think, is in a mind to make any specific comment to the zoning board relative to the density variance. I think you made the point well early in the whole discussion tonight, so we're not, unless I'm surprised, I don't think I will hear any comment along those lines, but still I'm happy to hear it if the board has some thoughts on that. Relative to the issue of the commercial component to this, and whether PUDs in particular parts of town are viable, present viable commercial alternatives, I would like to know perhaps what other board members may think along those lines. I realize that it may or may not be totally within the board's scope to handle how that may play out in the future, but it's probably become somewhat apparent that the notion of relatively minor commercial component to a PUD is really perhaps just putting a flag on a mountaintop, but not serving the fundamental goal that may have been thought of 20 years ago when the ordinance was established. So we are interested in that because that does have an impact on how we go about thinking through and designing this project.
So I know that the concept of a conditional use permit development isn't the same as a planned unit development as this one is, but they do have some common features in terms of putting residential and hopefully commercial or sometimes industrial developments together on one site for some common master planning for that site to think about how these things could be synergistic and work together. We do have 3 now conditional use permits that are in the works. One is the Flatley property, one is at the south end by the Nashua Corp, and one's by the Outlet Mall. And in all 3 of those cases, we've been very firm with holding the applicants to having commercial development as a part of getting their residential done. And there's been some discussion with phasing for them to allow them to kind of get their feet on the ground with some residential and then come back with some commercial. But ultimately, each one of them is required to have some commercial in their phases. And part of that discussion with all of them has been doing a financial study to make sure that they're tax revenue positive at every phase of the development. So even when you see something like the development, everybody's referring to it as Homestead, but it's called the Flatley development, that their apartment buildings, even as the initial phase, are tax positive. And that's been verified both by the applicant and by our own peer review. Conditional PUDs don't necessarily have that economic analysis component of it. At least maybe they do. I don't remember that they do.
Yes, they did.
They did.
believe
They do have to do the same kind of analysis. And that's where the commercial and the residential have kind of been combined in these projects to think about, let's get some development in here that's lower impact in terms of resources. It doesn't have kids in it. It doesn't have, the kinds of fire department demands that residential might have, or ambulance demands that residential may have because it's commercial. And that will allow us to get a development to be tax revenue positive. I do agree with what you're saying with sort of what was the original intent of the development, or are we sort of insisting on planting a flag for the sake of planting a flag? I like the expression that you use. Or is there some, fundamental purpose behind this? That's kind of what I was expressing before. But at the same time, at least as to this development, the commercial development wasn't supposed to be de minimis. It was supposed to be both sides of the entryway with the offices that are there that are now apartments and whatever was going to be developed on this side. They're only de minimis because we've now sort of given some ground to help out the developer, but we're down to kind of the last straw. And if this site doesn't become commercial, there isn't any, as you sort of mentioned before. Now, what you've proposed is having a little bit of commercial and another dose of residential added to it, whereas previous iterations of plans have said that this site and the one across the way that's now apartments are going to be the commercial development. And the residential is what exists down bottom, and that was the trade-off that was made. You get the single-family homes, you get the condos, and the trade-off is put some commercial up top. So I don't think of it as being de minimis commercial development or small or insignificant. I don't know what it could be or what it might be, depending on who might be interested in developing it. But as originally envisioned, it was supposed to be fairly substantial and not just coexisting, but in some way supportive of each other's uses, so that the commercial uses were somehow something someone could conceive of the people living in Crosswoods Path would have an interest in using. I don't know, at one point that might be a restaurant, but obviously a restaurant's not limited to the people from Crosswoods Path. Or a daycare, or some professional office that they might, come to patronize. So it's not just that we're supposed to have both pieces, but they're supposed to be synergistic. And we've been with the three other CUPs, and I haven't done a PUD in a while. I don't remember one.
Yeah.
Same concept. They're supposed to be working together as kind of a master planned development. And when you ask sort of what's the board's view been on that around other places, we've allowed the applicants some flexibility, but ultimately there is a line beyond which you got to get some commercial development in there. And some developments have taken a while to get off the ground because of that, but other developments are moving ahead, and I'm sure it was hard work for the folks that had developed the old Shaw's Plaza, but they found Dollar General, and they found Planet Fitness, and they found the haircutting place, and one by one they're able to find some commercial development that's viable in their site. And that's just one example, but every time we come together and meet, there's 2 or 3 commercial developments around town that we consider and take up and either approve or consider and move on. So
I think in the PUD setting, just the simple numbers of a project that has now 131 residential units with the 21 apartments, just isn't a large enough number of residential units to have a substantial impact, to be interactive or collaborative, if you will, with a commercial component.
certainly not all by themselves. It's got to be something the rest of the town would support and use as well.
Oh, yes, absolutely. But you couple that dynamic with location of this part of town, that's when the 2 factors just pull it down. They pull the viability of commercial use down, because you don't have a significant quantum in-house, if you will, and you don't have the location commercial-wise in this part of town that you would in other parts of town. So I'm not I'm not debating the analysis, I'm just thinking that the ordinance, by being an across-the-board town ordinance, that is, it could, you know, the PUD concept could go in various parts of the town. It would work in some parts of the town better than in other parts of the town. And maybe that's why the Crossroads Path dynamic is the way it is today. So,
It may be, but also there's some significance to the fact that at some point in the past, the developer chose their path.
Sure.
And, you know, that decision was made to take advantage of the PUD regulations as they stood to get what exists at Crosswood Path. And
no, you're absolutely right.
we
Somebody
didn't force
thought it
this
would
to-
work.
We didn't force this part.
No,
When
no,
this
no.
was a greenfield development, we didn't decide it should be a PUD.
No. Right, people come to you, and seek approvals. You don't go to them and extract projects, so, very true. Free will does still reign a little bit.
Some private property. Absolutely. I do take the message, and it's what I was asking out loud before, is whether the PUD concept and sort of forcing commercial and residential really has sustained viability going forward. But I don't think that that's a decision that the board makes with an application on the table in front of it, but more in terms of, you know, when it's time to redo the master plan and decide, you know, in big concepts, how's the town planned and laid out. Maybe the board would take a different look at development or redevelopment. And in fact, our 2013 master plan did talk about looking at the entire DW corridor in terms of being mostly about redevelopment in the very near future, because virtually all of the DW corridor is developed. There aren't a bunch of huge undeveloped parcels along DW Highway anymore.
Right.
You got one of them, but there's not that many of them.
Right, true.
So,
Well,
what else
again,
can we provide you for
I don't know if
feedback?
any other board members have any thoughts about the sort of broader issue, that's all, and.
No, I don't want to necessarily sort of go around the room and call people individually, but speak up if you got some.
I think you said it well, Mr. Chairman. I'm in agreement with most of the things you had to say. Yeah. Yeah.
Others? Anyone else?
I agree with what you and Nelson
Just reiterated.
I think your toughest challenge is convincing the board to want to do residential here instead of holding it to the commercial as the commercial element of the PUD. And I think most of the residents who spoke were they have some technical issues about how landscaping and lighting and water and erosion and driveways and all those things are held. But fundamentally, I think that the residential use is what they're most concerned about because of the
Actually,
traffic.
Mr. Chairman, I think you're not quite right. What they're actually saying is they don't really want to see anything up there at all, and they'd like to keep it as a walking area. And we can understand that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not criticising. I'm just trying to make it clear that there is a general thought that maybe it doesn't need that extra development, whatever it is.
Well, everybody that lives next to vacant land prefers that it stays vacant, I think. But there's also more than a few of the residents who gave a fair opinion about, if I've only got a choice between this and that, I'd rather have commercial.
Yeah. Oh, yes. True.
And I think some of that, if I may, without not speaking for the neighbors certainly, but some of that is derivative from the notion of traffic
Yes.
interaction, timing, et cetera. And that may or may not be material depending upon what a traffic assessment determines, so.
No, it's true, and ultimately, we're going to apply our regulations the way that we interpret them, and that isn't necessarily a matter of taking a straw poll among the neighbors, but you hear from them as residents of the residential half of the PUD. They're essentially almost like co-applicants with you because you're changing the PUD that their residence is a part of. And so their opinion isn't nothing.
No, it's true, and it's a little bit of a different type of case, because they are part of the very PUD for which the approval was granted. And they're not, strictly speaking, an abutter with no other interaction. I agree.
Right.
And that's why their comment is valuable, and that's why I wanted to listen more than speak.
Good observation.
Thank you for that. If there's nothing else, it doesn't require any vote of the board or any effort to close off this matter. For the benefit of the public, the applicant may choose to file an application immediately, may choose never to file an application, may choose to file one that's completely different than this one. Doing a conceptual site plan doesn't lock the applicant into any of this. All it was is exactly what we did, which was let's show it to everybody and get the feedback. So if there is an official submission of this or anything else, you'll get notice again the same way you got notice the first time. But other than that, you don't need to tune in next week to see the continuation of this discussion or anything like that. There isn't any of that going to happen. So
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the board, for taking the time this evening.
thank you for your presentation and for going through all of the details with us. Item 6 on our agenda is discussion and possible action regarding other items of concern. I have in my notes that we should take up a request for an extension of our approval of the MyBox development on Continental Boulevard, which is also College Bound Movers and some other businesses in that same site. Kelly, is there more information that you can provide for us on that?
No, Mr. Chair.
What are they requesting? 6 months extension from when to when?
I hate extensions. Yeah, no,
6-month extension.
I don't remember.
Folks, could we, we've got furthermore business. If you'd like to have your discussions outside, it would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you for that, Alistair. So, I'm sorry, Kelly, from when to when are we extending or continuing?
6-month extension effective October 3rd, 2018, extending to April 3rd, 2019.
Okay. So, it's been our typical approach with these where there haven't been any changes in our regulations that affect this application, as there have not been in this case, then we would generally be pretty free giving with these extensions. And this is for them to complete their conditions of approval that we required of them.
Do we have an
Chairman, I make a
update on?
motion, we grant them a 6 months extension.
I was just curious before we motion that.
So you can still have the comment, but we should understand whether there is a second for the motion first.
Sorry.
Is there a second? Second,
Okay,
okay, now,
okay.
Dan.
Just curious, why is it, did they come back to us to why they need 6 months? Like why the conditions aren't being met what's the
The
holdup?
state,
My-
NHDOT.
Yeah, our understanding is state permitting. That's
What's the permit they're trying to get?
a DOT permit.
Okay, so it's
That's
pretty
what
big.
their
There's
email.
also discussion about drainage. There's also discussion about drainage that comes off of DW Highway, goes across their property and goes on and.
Okay, so it's taken 6 months and we
Okay,
can't figure it out is what we're.
The DOT
With
is,
the DOT, you're lucky you can get it done in less
Gotcha.
than 12 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah, frankly, as we've had discussions at the master plan level about automatically giving longer periods of time for people to meet conditions of approval, just because this happens often.
All the time.
When
Yeah.
you're dealing, with the state.
Yeah. Nelson, did you have a comment on this?
Well, yeah, I had one comment, Mr. Chairman. I didn't realize when or exactly how we gave them permission to put those boxes in the parking lot,
Yeah, it kills me.
right smack on the road.
I can't stand it.
So
Yeah,
I thought the same thing, and because of that, I had the staff let me know when that was approved, and I went back and watched the meeting just so I could see the
Oh,
discussion.
good.
And what I found was the reason why I couldn't remember is I wasn't at that meeting.
You mustn't.
Oh, you got
Alistair
away.
chaired.
I chaired.
Alistair chaired this meeting. I wasn't there. You guys weren't even on the board yet. This was April of 2016 was when the approval for that site was given.
This is the
and
Continental Boulevard. site.
yeah, the Continental Boulevard site. And I listened to the video of the entire presentation intently, and there was zero discussion about where they could put their My Boxes. And so what they have as a note on their plan is that they wanted to and intended to put them in any unused parking space. And because we never reined them in or changed that with the board, that was ultimately what they got approved. So.
Just- The extension is for Herrick Street,
Right. Herrick Street.
not,
We
okay. I
know
just
it,
want to be
but
clear.
Not
Nelson's
Continental.
Bringing
On
up my
Yeah,
box.
yeah, okay.
Okay.
Same company, but different
Correct.
location, yeah.
No, but, all right.
I just wanted to make that clear.
Well, I'm
Yes.
glad you did. I'm glad you did.
Yeah, that does make sense because since they're under construction, I would think that they had completed whatever they got going on Continental Boulevard. So this is for Herrick Street, which is down by the Nashville Corp, where they're building kind of their main headquarters. And if you remember, that one was the one that had the glass tower on one side with some offices in it and big American flag and a tower on the other side. And so they're dealing with DOT permits to get their driveways dealt with over there and some drainage. And the questions about this other application, answer is still what it is, but
We failed.
We might remind them when we grant them this, that we would appreciate.
Well, the upside to this is the one thing that is clear in the Continental Boulevard application is that Herrick Street, when it's finished, replaces that, and
I
they're
know.
moving out of Continental Boulevard into the Herrick Street one where there isn't any external
Well, okay, we would
storage.
appreciate them doing that part of the plan, which doesn't require DOT approval to be executed. Namely,
You could build the building and put it in. Okay, so,
Okay.
motion and
So-
properly second to give them their 6-month extension. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 600 to grant them their extension. Does anyone else have any other items of concern that they wish to
I'd
discuss?
just like to bring to everybody's
Yeah,
attention.
but Dan raised his hand first.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Well, I got two. One, they're gonna take a few minutes, so,
Let me have it.
hopefully I'll take one at a time. I just want the board's opinion on, Executive Park Drive. I'm not sure if anybody noticed, but, it was sold to SMC Management, out of Everett, Mass. Couple things. Is it possible for the board to construct a letter to the new owner to have them come in and understand that they are, under obligation to abide by the to the plans that have been decided on by the board? Is that something that we can do?
We haven't done anything like that in the past, but I can tell you that when they go to get their permits and things, they're gonna be reminded that they've got a site plan approval that they're obligated to.
I just was curious if it was, in due diligence to invite them in here, because it is, it's not Mr. Singer anymore, it's somebody else. Just to say, hey, have you reviewed the site plans? Are you aware of all the contingencies and all the things that, are you good? Before they break ground? Because they're apparently starting to break ground here this fall, which leads me to my second thing. Under my impression, there was still a DOT letter for the lighting, for the traffic lights in the peer-to-peer system. Does business or community development have that letter yet? Do we have that? Because I don't think they're supposed to break ground until that happens.
I think that though we signed those plans, which would have meant that all the conditions of approval had been met, but I don't know
I'm not
specifically
sure
about
the
letter.
status of the letter, but I know that, I actually think it was earlier today, Robert and Tim met with these new owners.
Okay.
To just a meet and greet.
Well, I mean, that's
exactly what
a
you're talking
huge
about,
factor of
So.
this project.
Yes, it was.
And if we don't have that DOT support, I don't know if this article
It didn't
is.
get approved without
correct.
the DOT.
But the plans are
support.
signed, so
Yeah.
we have final plans.
So whatever
and
the
we have
conditions of
Mylars.
approval are would have been met in order to get the plans signed.
Right.
I believe that when we dealt with the question, when the application was before us, we were dealing with the question of actually not the letter, but
Right.
getting the light installed. That was tied to the certificate of occupancy, that they have to have the lights installed and running and synchronized and doing their magic before you get a certificate of occupancy for anything.
So does
because
that
it's
mean
the
they can,
rule.
so does that mean that they can break ground and construct until that
That's what it
light?
means.
Okay.
If my memory is right.
Right, no, I think that's correct. I was
Just
just,
rent.
I just want to make sure because we have a bunch of big projects going on, that these people are held accountable and that everything's being done. If you said you signed it, then they've met the conditional approvals. I wish as a board, as a community development, that we would be kind of aware of these big milestones. That's a huge piece of this puzzle.
Yes,
You know,
it is.
and the fact that you're reading about it in the Union newspaper, that it's been sold is a little frustrating, because when my friends ask me, hey, I didn't realize that, Executive Park Drive was moving forward this fall, I'll be like, I assumed the letter or the DOT approval was not there yet.
But I mean, the thing I would recall is that, and I don't know your answer, but I do know that the DOT gave a verbal assurance that they were very excited about it and were going to watch it with great interest. So if they haven't got a formal letter, I know that the DOT issued a sort of happy to go along with it. So
Okay.
it's worth finding out.
Is there any way that we can ask Kelly, if we can ask Tim or Rob or whoever?
Yeah,
if
I mean,
it's-
I just have to be a matter of pulling the file and looking
Yeah.
for the letter itself. But I believe one of the conditions of approval, as with most projects, is attaining any
Yeah.
state
Well,
approvals. and
No,
necessary
I understand.
things.
And I think you're right. I think it was a CUP. And then, so it could happen in conjunction. That's, like, when I read this article, I'm like, wow, they're gonna break ground, but I haven't seen it. You know what I mean? And I thought, from the way I understood it, was that they needed that before anything happened. But if it's already been signed and moved on, then
Well, it's still worth going back and checking and making sure that it wasn't overlooked and that
Okay.
it was actually there, and I'm
That
sure
was
that it is.
key.
but-
That was a key thing.
It's a
though.
key.
Those-
Yeah, they're
those are
certainly,
huge
yeah,
part
they're
of the whole
certainly gonna
project.
get the light done as a part of
'Cause
this, because
nothing-
letter
nothing-
or not, that
right.
was certainly clear in their approval that the whole thing is contingent on the lights being in and running and
Right.
operating.
I mean, you drive by that site, nothing's happened, right? It's just still a big pile of dirt, so.
Yeah.
Big pile of rock.
But I'm
Colorado.
sure, Mr. Chairman will correct me if I'm right or wrong, when somebody buys or sells a business, it's up to their, I mean, given the sort of sum of money involved, I'm sure their attorneys will have gone through everything with a fine tooth comb. Is that not, am I not
Well,
right?
and this,
Yeah, it is. And so I'd be more worried about a small a project than something that's, millions of dollars and a lot of potential to it. And I think the fact that they've met with the department tells me that they're already tuned into the fact that they've got a site plan that's in existence, and they also do a pre-construction meeting with the town where they talk about these things, and they get into their permits themselves and things. Now, can they push dirt around on the site and cut trees and do all sorts of things that look like development without a building permit? Yeah, they can.
yeah, right,
But they could have done that without ever getting a planning board approval too.
sure.
Um,
I get it. I just wanted to double check. I just didn't hear anything. It's been since February, I think, when we gave them conditional final approval. So it's been a while.
It's been a while. I don't remember when it is, but it brings up
March.
another thing that is available to us that I think that we used with the outlet mall, which was just simply asking the staff to give us some regular updates as to how this project or any others are moving along.
I think that's a good idea.
Have there
Monthly
been-
would be nice, I think. I don't
Let's
think we
get-
need to do it weekly.
Let's
but-
get an update right now on what this is.
So definitely get an
Yeah.
update on this one, but
Yeah.
if we want to have kind of the 5 biggest or the 2 biggest or whatever, or just
Yeah.
this one and flatly, just
Yeah.
have kind of part of the planning and zoning administrator's report.
Great idea.
Every meeting or every other meeting,
That would be good.
giving us, what's
Yeah,
going on, if anything.
Let's do that, Bob. Let's do that, yeah.
We did that all through the outlet mall. I remember
Yeah, we
get
did.
regular
Yeah, we
reports
did.
on
We got a
that.
lot. We got a lot of balls up in the air, so
Yeah.
it'd be nice to know.
So what sites do you want to have the planning department give us regular updates on? So
Executive
some of
Park.
them, like some of these subdivisions, like the one by the middle school,
Yeah.
we approved years ago and nobody's touched it, and the update is nobody's touched it.
Right.
Except for cutting all the trees.
My opinion is the outlet mall one, Flatley, Executive Park Drive, and maybe the one with the YMCA. I can't think of it. Across from King Cone there, down.
Yeah, that one's
uh,
gonna be NeighborWorks. is
NeighborWorks.
what it's called.
Neighbor should works, yeah.
Those are probably the 4 that
Yeah, it's a good thought.
I'd
So
be interested in.
Outlet Mall, Executive Park, Flatley, NeighborWorks, and I think there was another one that I had in mind, the senior development up on the hill.
Overlook?
Oh, sure, sure, sure.
Overlook.
Yeah, Chamberlain.
Overlook?
Yeah.
Chamberlain Road.
Up Chamberlain Road.
Okay.
I think some of the other ones like Greenfield Farms that are way out in the country, and the thing up on Wire Road and middle
So
school
the
and
one
those.
up on Wire Road, I think I'd like to hear about. I hear a lot from the neighbors out there. There's activity on that site right now. they're putting in the sewer or the water or something.
Good.
Yeah,
there.
Greenfield Farms?
Yes, Greenfield, yes,
14 or
thank you.
15 or something.
Yeah.
Part 15 or 16. There was another
Well,
one up
yeah,
there,
that's
though.
the huge sewer
That-
project that's going on right now at Brenda Lane and.
Yeah.
There's just a sewer portion at this point in
Yeah,
time that's
just the
being,
sewer extension.
that's what's happening right now.
Yeah.
So, Kelly, is that a clear enough list of what ones we're interested in? And I don't want to make it a huge burden, but it can be as simple as, you know, there's a construction meeting, or nothing's really happened since the last time we've talked, or
Sure.
they pulled a permit.
Okay, I think that's good. I mean, for lack of time, my second thing I wanted to bring up is Flatley, so we've talked about this one. But, Kelly, have you seen this letter from DHS? DS?
Not from here.
I mean, it's dated September 7th, and basically what it says, and I'm hoping that the business development got this letter.
Who's it addressed to?
It's addressed to Mr. Flatley from Assistant Commissioner Clark Freeze. Basically saying that there's four items on here that they're gonna pull their alteration permit if they don't comply with, okay? One of them being that they are currently under construction on more than 5 acres, which is contrary to project plans. And there's a couple other ones on here. They haven't produced a SWIP, which is Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, they haven't reported the rainfall 24 hours after it happens. They're not monitoring their wells. They haven't done the groundwater management plan. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, what I'm trying to bring up is, this is a major project with a lot of eyes on it. I mean, there's articles everywhere about the PFOAs and PFOS, you know, at very extremely high levels. They're not complying with what the board said they could do. And it says it right there, and this is 10 days ago. I'm just wondering who's accountable for this, who watches these people, and what can we do about it to make them fix this before they can continue?
So DES is making them fix it, because those are all DES issues. Those aren't
Well-
planning board issues.
So I think one of the items on there was about providing stormwater reports.
Yep.
So that does come through our office. I didn't personally see the letter, but I believe Robert and Tim are aware of it.
Well,
If I'm recalling correct, Robert has been in contact with the Flatley folks, and they did provide the drainage reports, or stormwater reports, rather, that we didn't have, that
Okay.
they hadn't submitted.
Well, I think it's part of that update process we were just talked about. I mean, what bothers me the most out of this whole letter is that for conditional final approval, they needed an alteration of terrain permit, right? Which they got from DOT or DES or whatever. They're not abiding by it. So if they're in violation, then technically shouldn't they be in violation of the plans?
It would be only if DOT pulls their permit.
Well,
We require that they have a
my
permit.
point is they're threatening to pull it right now. And it's
So
10
right
days
now,
ago.
they have the permit,
Currently, they have it.
so they're
Yeah.
compliant.
Okay, but what about the 5 acre one that says that they can't build on more than 5 acres, and that's part of the plan?
That's not our regulation,
It's
though.
not
That's
us.
DES's regulation.
Are we
We
sure
didn't
about
have
that
any
one?
limitations
It's all
on
in the
5 acres or anything like
alteration
that, so.
terrain permit. I mean, the moment the permit gets pulled, we'd know, presumably the town would be told.
Okay.
But until they actually pull it,
Yeah,
legally,
and beyond
what-
that, once they do pull it, DES is the one that stops them from building.
Okay, all right, well, I just wanted to bring that up,
That's
because,
good.
no, what I'm trying to say is, this company is not doing a very good job at abiding by the rules, okay? So I'm wondering if they're doing other things that are part of our plans that were approved, that we're not aware of, right? So is there a way like, who checks that? A project this size, who is checking that they're not doing this stuff? Like, are they removing soil, like, even though it's not, you don't have to do it, but are they removing soil at night that no one knows about? Like, how do we check this?
And the town is monitoring it as best they can, and anything the town is capable of monitoring in that respect, they are doing.
Like, can you give me an example?
Well,
For
there've been
example-
discussions with the developers out there to understand what's going on. They've gone out and they've asked questions specifically about, have you been removing soil, have you been doing things? and whatnot.
And what were those results?
Well, I don't have the report. I know a report is being put together.
Okay.
But,
That's all good information. I'd
but
love
trying
see
to be,
it.
trying to make it factual as opposed to conjecture, which is what a lot of what you see going around is, a lot of conjecture. Somebody saw a truck, they decided it was dirt. Somebody else claimed it was sawdust.
Well,
Who
I guess-
knows what it is? So
I
we're
guess-
trying to find that out.
No, I understand that, and I appreciate you asking those questions because, you look at this letter, they've been asked on May 14th to come up with a, hold on, this is one part of it, let me just make sure it's clear. Since May 14th, NHDES recommended that Flatley develop a soil and groundwater management plan to minimize the potential for exacerbation and expansion of existing soil and groundwater contamination at the Flatley property. They have not done that yet. This is May.
That's true.
That's true, but what did you
But
just
it's a
read?
DES.
No, I understand
issue
that. What I'm trying to
requirement.
say is, Flatley seems like they are not doing what's in the best interest of this project. And
That
we
may
need checks
be.
and balances to do that. And asking them if they take a truck of dirt away is not the way to do it. Doesn't make sense to me.
We don't have control over those things, and so what
We have
we've-
control of our plans,
what
right?
We have, yeah, and they are following our plan. They have not
None of the things
deviated
that
from
you've-
what plan we approved.
None of
for
the
them
things
at
that
this
you've
point.
listed are issues that are within our jurisdiction to regulate, including and frankly, what you just read is since May, we've recommended that you take some steps. And frankly, if Flatley wants to thumb their nose at a recommendation, I don't know that even DES is going to do anything about that. Now, if it's
Fair
a
enough.
requirement, then DES can enforce it, but we don't have authority to come behind DES and say, we think that you should do a stormwater plan that suits our view of things. Now, that said,
Don't you think-
I don't want to defend Flatley. If DES wants to beat them up and they're not complying with the requirements from DES, fine. From our viewpoint, we're dealing with things like building permits and fire permits and driveway permits and those kinds of inspections that occur related to those.
I understand what you're saying, that this is DES or NHDES, I get it.
Yeah.
What I'm just saying that it seems like they're doing things in the shadows. And I don't appreciate that. I don't think the board should appreciate that. I don't think the residents should appreciate that. They're working on a property that's been documented to be contaminated with PFOAs and PFOS, right? They should be doing it better than anybody else, and they're not. Obviously, they're not doing it. And whether we can do anything about it or not, that's kind of what I was trying to bring up here. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. But I think that this letter shows that Flatley needs to be accountable, at least on our end. And however we have to do that, we need to do it. Whether it's business development, community development, whatever it is, or whatever the board can do, or write them a letter, or do something. So I mean, you can there's 4 things here that it's not hard. Just do it. That's all I gotta say.
Dan, I'd be interested, how did you get hold of that letter?
Try and post it online
It's on DES website.
And could I ask you to make certain that a copy of that is sent to Tim Thompson?
Well, they have it.
They have it?
The town
Oh,
has
okay.
received that
I was
letter.
just saying that I personally haven't read it.
She
or
hasn't
I
seen
would
it,
hope
but I
the
know
town
Eileen
has
has
it. I mean, if
gotten
the
it,
town
and I know
doesn't
I-
have it, then there's definitely an issue in communication between the 2
I'm
parties.
almost positive town manager has
I
been
can
made
guarantee
well
it,
aware of
because
that
I
letter.
have it, and I got it from the town manager.
There you
So-
go.
Well, let me ask you this, Tom. I mean, why didn't you share that with the board? I mean, wouldn't that be something that we'd be interested in?
It's not something that the planning board has jurisdiction over. It's not something that we can control. The town manager is in contact with DES, is in contact with Flatley. They're working the issues out as best they can to try and burden the planning board with something that we can't. We approved their plan before the PFAS became an issue. And so now they're working with an approved plan. If we were to approve the plan today, it might be completely different than what it is. But it is what it is, and we have to live with that and work with it as best we can.
If they were to pull the permit, then they would be in violation of the terms that we set forth, right?
If DES pulls the alteration of terrain permit, they would have to cease and desist until they could get an alteration of terrain permit, yes.
Right, okay.
Now, there's also another component of this to sort of understand how the process of ordinarily enforcing the site plan conditions, and that is not the planning board going out and inspecting properties or hauling an applicant before us to answer for some shortcoming. The way that all of that happens, and Neil, we talked about this on other properties, is you got to file a request for service with the department saying so-and-so built their building too tall or too close to the road, or they've got a sign up that they're not allowed to have, or whatever it is. And then the department does the enforcement, not this board. And even if the department does the enforcement, that doesn't bring them before us to decide whether someone's complying with our site plan or not. That's still the department's regulation to do. And that's not by our choice or by our own regulation. That's state statute in terms of what planning boards are entitled to do. As it happens, if the department did raise a compliance issue with someone and say, you're out of compliance with your site plan, we're gonna pull your your certificate of occupancy, the appeal of that actually is to the zoning board, and then to court. But the path doesn't really matter. It doesn't flow through here. And
I just don't think
I don't offer that comment as being a cheerful note about the way I think it ought to happen. It simply is what it is.
I just don't think they're being very good neighbors, that's all. And
It may well
it's
be, and I
frustrating.
don't know the details about those specific things that are in the letter, because I hadn't seen the letter. I don't know whether those are simply a matter of filing the right forms and checking the boxes, or whether those things substantively deal with the possibility that they're harming the environment. And a lot of times with DES permits, there's requirements to file certain things, and I don't know if they file something with the right title on it as a stormwater protection plan or something else, and then somebody checks a box and says, okay, I got your plan. Just like, frankly, when we tell someone to file with the department what their oil spill protection plan is for a development that we approve. They file a 10-page document and the department says, got it, and that's it. I don't know what those things are, so.
Like the gentleman here earlier today said, they do an annual inspection of that oil water separator to make sure that it's functioning.
Yeah.
I mean, it isn't just ignored. There are some things that maybe are, like pervious asphalt and things like that, are not followed up as carefully as they ought to be. Don't know for sure, but there are plenty of those issues are in fact followed up and covered.
But it is good to be passionate about them and to raise the issues for discussion. I can tell you there's passionate people on the town council, there's passionate people with the MVD, and I don't think that those letters are landing on deaf ears when they're getting sent and they're getting copied to folks. It may not be always the solution that one of us might
No, it's
imagine it
not.
should be. What's that, Tom?
It's not always the solution people want to see. I mean, just like the people here today would love to see that land be vacant land, so they could put trails on it, but they don't necessarily have that option or that choice with the Crosswood Paths thing. I mean, somebody's likely to develop that land if it's developable, and we have the option to try and steer that into, along with our regulations, but just the fact that they would rather see it vacant doesn't mean anything relative to how we are allowed to control that property.
Yep, thank you for allowing me to bring those two things up.
Thanks for bringing it.
But it's very interesting.
up
Thanks
and,
for bringing it to our
get the
attention.
discussion
I'm
on the
fascinated.
table.
I mean, it's a Google
Yeah.
search, and it's unfortunately they have to go that way, and we're not getting the information. I mean, I don't know if there's a better way, but it's brought to my attention because people know I'm here,
Super.
right?
Yep.
That's
So,
great.
Good.
I mean,
Well, that's why citizens are on the board, is so that everybody knows somebody that can connect with them, and we get information any number of different ways. It doesn't have to come through some person at the table up here. It can be in line at the grocery store. But it's good to have the information, and that fits well with the idea of let's get those projects on a list of things that we regularly getting feedback
That's a
from.
great idea.
And
Yeah.
to the extent we are doing regular reports on projects, a letter like that, one of the things that should be part of that report that says,
Yes.
hey, we got a letter.
We got a letter.
Yeah.
Great.
I didn't get a letter, but, which I'm surprised because I've gotten the other letters from DES on this project because the chair of the planning board. Anyway, other items of discussion that somebody wants to address?
Just to bring everybody's attention, if you go and look at the Merrimack 360 plan, it's the old Shore site, one of the eating areas has disappeared under tarmac, so it looks now there's only going to be one eating place on that site.
Which was that?
Well, I saw that same thing too, because I joined Planet Fitness and I drive through there, and in the spirit of disclosure, I always recuse myself from consideration of that application because they're a client. But the fact that they paved over a pad site just means that they don't have anybody in mind right now. It could
That's what I
certainly
just thought
reappear as a
everybody should
pad
know.
site.
I only found it because I took the granddaughter to the trampoline place.
Yes, which is now open. My daughter's been to that too.
And my boys have been there 3 times already.
The trampoline place?
Yep.
I like it.
Yep.
Anyway,
flyer card.
it's pretty normal for there to be pad sites on the front of sites that don't look like it until they're ready to become pad sites.
Well, they didn't do a good job paving it, so you're probably right, Mr. Chairman. It's pretty rough.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what the applicant's.
In regards to that, I am happy to see the way they handled the construction site that's currently going up, because it was a concern of mine that it is an active construction in the middle of a parking lot with a group of businesses that are open. And I did go by there, and it looks like they're maintaining it pretty well and keeping it pretty
Secure.
pretty tight. Yeah.
Pretty
So
fenced, yeah.
I was glad to see that.
Excellent. Other items of concern and discussion? Okay, that brings us to the approval of the minutes of September 4th, 2018. What's the will of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we approve the minutes as printed.
Is there a second to approve the minutes as printed?
Second.
Second by Neil Anketel. Any discussion? All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any
I'm
opposed?
abstaining.
Any abstaining? Nelson
I
abstains.
was absent from that meeting.
Yes. Okay, so.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we
5-1
adjourn.
5-0-1 on the minutes, and now we have a motion to adjourn. And is there a second on the
I'll
motion to
second
adjourn?
the motion to-
Nelson seconds Alistair's motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.